Just to explain, Miss Diamond being in transit, the Loop Parkway Bridge is stuck in the open position and she's trapped in the traffic. So we're not sure when she'll be able to arrive, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Would you give us the city update?
Yes, we had a Women Entrepreneurs Networking event on Sunday. The City and the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce joined to host a Women's Entrepreneurs Networking event. Attendees had the opportunity to network with local entrepreneurs and hear from a panel of amazing women. The event was part of an ongoing effort to encourage an environment in which women-owned businesses can grow and thrive. Panelists included City Council Vice President Humi Diamond, Director of Economic Development and Planning, Patty Bourne, Director of the Long Island Small Business Development Center, Erica Chase Gregory, owner of Eagles and Volkers, and board member of the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Tozer, and Nicole Bergman, who recently launched their own lifestyle blog, Between the Boards and the Bay. This Friday night will be Tween Night Out from 5:30 to 8:30 for middle school students. It'll be held at the Long Beach Ice Arena. The event includes free ice skating, a snack bar meal, and more. The Kenny Plazas Farmers Market returns for the season starting this Saturday, May 5th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. The market will be open on Wednesdays and Saturdays through November 10th. For additional information, visit ligreenmarket.org. First Fridays Plus, this Sunday, May 6th, the Long Beach Arts Council, in cooperation with the Long Beach Public Library, will host the Metropolitan Klezmer Quintet in a concert at the library. The program starts at 2. This First Friday event is free for all, and all are welcome. Looking ahead to the summer, the City of Long Beach Youth and Family Service Day Trippers Summer Camp runs for 8 weeks from June 25th to August 17th, all day from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's geared for children ages 5 to 12 and includes trips to amazing places like Six Flags, Splish Splash, and Medieval Time, along with great activities such as swimming, sports, arts and crafts, games, and more. For detail, visit the city's website or call 431-3510. And finally, beach passes go on sale Monday, May 7th at the Recreation Center gazebo. For more information, you can call 431-1021. It will be open only weekdays from now till Memorial Day weekend. Weekdays 9 to 6, weekends 9 to 4, and then there'll be a much more availability. The last thing I have is I kind of consider this unfinished business. The $2.1 million bond that was defeated for separation pays, we've been able to find $550,000 in old bonds that were geared for separation pays that hadn't been gone to their maximum. So we have $550 towards that. I have ordered non-essential overtime to be cut and anticipated $200,000 savings. All spending has been curtailed except for emergencies, which I anticipate saving another $200,000. My replacement of the city manager at no cost to the city, plus not replacing his secretary, the controller, the deputy controller, will have saved through the end of June $265,000, which brings us to 1.215. So we're still about $900,000 shy. We have had meetings with the unions to see about getting concessions, and that's an ongoing process. Oh, and all the exempt employees met and have made an offer to the city. That was just made right before this meeting. I haven't had a chance to calculate the savings.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, we'll call the first hearing.
First item this evening is a public hearing for the purpose of giving citizens an adequate opportunity to publicly present their views on the general summary of the proposed budget for the year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
This is exactly what the resolution says, an opportunity for the public to let their thoughts be known. The budget was delivered to the council on April 10th and released to the general public on April 20th. We created a sheet that's in the back of the room, which gives you a breakdown of where your tax dollar goes. We also have pretty much itemized all the departments, and it does come with a proposed 12.363 tax increase. Okay, the budget opens up with an address from me, which I'd like to read at this time for anyone that hasn't seen it, to give you a little insight into how I arrived at the budget and the mindset that went into it. Dear fellow resident, this year the proposed budget was formulated with a fresh perspective. As a 40-year city employee and lifelong resident, I fully recognize the complex financial issues and unique challenges we face to provide a quality of life our community deserves. As acting city manager, I've worked diligently with my department heads, taking great care in preparing this document. Providing the services our residents have come to expect comes with a cost, and this year's budget reflects that reality. Rising fixed costs, we acknowledge that the financial hurdles the city has faced since the inherited fiscal crisis in 2012 have not gone away. Rising health care and pension funding, contractually obligated salary increases, and legal judgments remain major challenges while looking to maintain and improve infrastructure and programming. Public safety and employee benefits represent more than 45% of the city's annual budget. With that in mind, we have worked with our union partners to find real savings to ease the burden on local taxpayers. As it currently stands, only our non-union management employees, less than 1% of the city's workforce, and now recent new CA hires are the only ones who pay a portion of their health care. This is simply unsustainable. We need all of our unions to continue to follow management's lead. If there is not a substantial contribution from employees toward their health care costs, personnel reductions and service cuts will eventually become necessary. Post-Sandy repairs. In the 5 years since Sandy, the city has undertaken hundreds of public works projects totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. While the repairs and improvements have helped revitalize our city, these long-term investments are not free. Though the city has worked extremely hard to ensure that reimbursement funding from FEMA and New York State would assist in the daunting task of rebuilding, we are still responsible for laying out the initial funds prior to reimbursement. Additionally, the city has had to pay for a significant portion of its infrastructure enhancements not directly related to Sandy. Every year, residents repeatedly ask for more roads to be resurfaced, and as such, the city has made this a top priority. Since 2012, the city has nearly tripled road repaving and reconstruction projects with 36 total, 6 per year. In the last 6 years, compared to 2.2 per year from 2002 to 2011. Also, when the decision is made to reconstruct a street, the improvements are not simply superficial. Along with the overlay, the city also rebuilds the sewers and drainage with resiliency. We also coordinate with PSENG and National Grid to ensure smart installation of utilities. We are extremely fortunate that our city includes a number of services and departments most municipalities do not have. For instance, many neighboring communities do not have their own dedicated police, paid fire, recreation, events, transportation, and planning departments. We are also responsible for maintaining our 2.2-mile boardwalk. In addition, preservation of the characteristics of our Ocean Beach Park is critical not only to the natural environment, but to the very essence of what makes Long Beach extraordinary. I am proud of our shining city by the sea and the tremendous accolades we received in the media, including USA Today declared Long Beach one of the top 10 beaches in the country. Newsweek lauded us for having the cleanest beach in the region. New York Times spotlighted our real estate market. Newsday named our boardwalk the #1 summer destination. SafeWise named us one of the top 10 safest cities in New York State. Though these accolades require a great deal of city resources to achieve, they help set us apart. Long Beach residents can be truly proud of their city and its many recent successes. Intelligence-driven budget. Planning for the coming year, we have devised a realistic budget that represents our actual costs. Looking to the future, this administration must remain committed to slashing overtime and discretionary spending across the board. Using our performance management metric, we can no longer allow department heads to arbitrarily control their budgets. We have to treat our city more like a business. Management is needed now more than ever to ensure accountability and make the hard choices for the budget that is responsible, defendable, sustainable, very truly yours.
Thank you for reading that. Okay, so we're going to open this up to the floor to hear your thoughts on how we proceed forward. We're here to listen and take notes. You will get 3 minutes of time. So do we want to start? Anyone would care to come up? Right here, ma'am, right in the front. I'm Ms. Vilsavich.
Mary Volasevich. You've said the unions I know have made concessions. I know for a fact that CSEA made a concession, and they've all tried to work with the city. With that being said, why are we giving raises when all these people that live paycheck to paycheck, why are we giving raises to, I have here, Corporation Council? Well, you know what you've got in here. Corporation Council is $25,000. You just got a payout. I mean, well, these people live paycheck to paycheck, and you're giving raises out. I don't see where you're making concessions. It seems that the concessions are just coming from the working people. And I don't understand why. Why?
Yeah, sure, it is.
And my other question is, and I'll address it to you, Mr. Agostisi.
Please.
Okay, I'm sorry if, I'm annoying you, but
No.
I
by-
have
by
a
all
right
means,
to
continue.
ask. I pay
By all
my
means,
taxes.
Ms. Balasevich, I can't wait for your question.
Okay, my question is, when you move somebody from an exempt position to a position within the CSEA, don't you have to send that up to the state making a new position?
No.
You don't have to do that?
No.
You sure?
Oh, I'm positive, yes.
All right, because I got it from an attorney that used to work here, okay? And you cannot just make up positions, okay? And it has to be approved.
If the position exists already, there's no need to send, and
Mike.
there's-
We have a cashier.
if the position exists already, there's no need to send anything up to the state. If it's already a permissible position, that is, excuse me.
So who is our cashier now?
I have no idea.
Okay.
So wait, Ms. Volasevich, I do have a question. So these raises that we talk about, let's just say it's 1% of the budget, for argument's sake. The
There
exempt.
should be no raises.
Okay, so let's say we take those raises back. So
With all due
so then-
respect, Mr.
so-
Aramo,
so
you don't write a check out,
I-
okay?
I did not.
And then
I have a
hope you have
question
the
for
money
you.
to cover it.
I have a question though. So if we were to not give those raises, if those raises were not given out, let's say we get down to the 11%, is there something in this budget that you would like to see cut? Is there a service or something that you would like to see cut? Because this is the budget hearing, so I do want to hear what you have to say about the budget.
I don't think our services day to day need to be cut. You have people that have waited years to become full-time employees. I don't think it's fair to constantly take from that group. I don't think it's right.
The CSEA gave 0% raise. They gave back a lot. I'm agreeing
Yes,
with
they
you.
did,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm totally agreeing with you. But
I mean,
I'm
I
just
did my
asking about the
homework.
budget.
I'm not talking out of my
Right.
head.
Right.
But I don't see where you feel you have the right to give out anything at this time, any raise. I wouldn't care who it was for. I don't think you have a
That's true.
right to do that. I don't care if it's 1%. I don't care if it's a fraction of a
Okay.
percent. You're in a hole.
I
You got to
understand.
dig yourself
And that's
out.
why I'm asking if you have any recommendations based on the budget that you would like
well,
to
I
dig.
think you need.
All right. Okay, so that's
Sorry.
okay, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Lester. I called this gentleman here. I'm gonna call on this side of the room first. I'm sorry. I called this gentleman right here in the teal shirt. Please state your name and address.
Yes, good evening. My name is Alex Mogilnicki. I live at 76 Heron Street here in town. Okay, let's try that again. Can you hear me in the back? Fantastic. All right.
Good
so-
evening, sir.
Sure. You ready? And you're close. I would have thought you could have heard me. My name is Alex Mogilnicki.
Mogul.
Okay, a couple of things. One suggestion. I know I shared with all of you the concept of creating an external advisory panel, which I think would be quite helpful. Second piece, I think if you want to make trade-off decisions, what you need to see is data on the impact of trade-offs. The budget document doesn't really show anything in terms of service metrics or service levels. May very well be somewhere, but it's not at least apparent to me. The third piece I want to discuss fringes or suggestion fringes a little bit on this concept of vacation time. Now, my background is in private industry, and a long time ago, to take this concept of to address the concept of sick leaves, to address the concept of vacation time, people instituted caps in private industry. So if you got 2 weeks, you got 2 weeks, use it or lose it. And the exception, I wasn't looking for applause, guys. I don't know that this is the right thing, but it strikes me that you're creating something that goes well beyond vacations. You're creating an ongoing financial liability, which you can neither predict nor can you manage. And the way you have to manage it is through a set of exception process controls, which I think, if I reconstitute the discussion on this issue, didn't work particularly well. So my thinking is, why can't you simplify it? If the purpose of vacation time is to take vacation, and the purpose of sick time is to compensate you when you're ill, that shouldn't be an accruing revenue stream that, quite frankly, may very well present as a risk to the city, but in point of fact becomes a long-term compensation pool for an individual. Now, I have no issue in taking on compensation. I think that's a good thing. To the extent that positions are underpaid or undervalued, I think we should address it that way. I think what's happened is the de facto practice here has created a liability that you can neither predict nor adequately manage. I think you can simplify that. There may be contractual ramifications. I don't know the majority of your labor force is under contract, but at the very least, it is, to my way of thinking, a simple win to eliminate that practice for any exempt employee.
So I could speak to that a little bit, just in terms of, I think 99% of our workforce is under contract. The exempt employee staff right now, I think, is 14 exempt staff.
Yeah, the reason I suggested exempt is it's
Yep.
much easier to work out a transition plan with 14 people than with several thousand.
No, and I think the whole council has spoken that that's something we do want to do and look at, but unfortunately, it is 14 employees.
I understand that.
Whereas something may seem, we don't like the practice, and we can,
It's okay.
fix it moving
my
forward.
job here wasn't to get you to answer now. It was to try and share some information with you, because
Okay.
I think you still got several weeks before this has to be locked down.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Name and
Good
address.
evening, Roy Lester, 72 Boyd Street. I know Mary Velasovich brought up the contractual increases. I don't quite understand how last year you had, what was it, 227,000 worth of increases, contractual increases, and this year it's 830,000. Why such a big jump?
Our brothers and sisters of the CSEA took a 0 increase last year,
So,
which was reflected in the minuscule tax
well,
increase
but
last year.
0 is not 227,000. It's 4 times the amount.
Mr. Lester, I'm sure you're very well on the school board that there are step increases. I think that was disingenuous.
It was step increases then. So last
there's
year they
also-
had the step increases. It wasn't 0.
There was an associated increases contractually we were obligated to all.
So last year there was an increase, but it was step increase, not the actual wages. They took home more money, but they didn't take home more in those contractual wages, is what you're saying. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So when I look at some of the increases, you have like 19% for some people. Is that, are those individuals, or are you actually increasing the number of people? Let's say here you have the principal accountant clerk went from 87,000 to 103,000, a 19% increase. Is that just one person?
Yes,
The-
and that person is filling in for Shari James, and we factored in that increase into that $265,000 savings. So we took that increase off of what we saved, so we'd give you a true number of what was saved.
So, and the payroll supervisor went from 64,000 to 81,000, a 26% increase?
Who did?
Well, the
Ms.
commissioner,
Hightower?
I'm sorry.
Who is it?
Commissioner-
Who is that? Say that again. What was the title?
Payroll supervisor.
Is this working? Okay, so the way the CSEA salary schedules work is there's an A and a B schedule. And for the first 10 years of your employment, you're on a lower salary schedule. And in year 10, you jump into the higher salary schedule. You will have people every year, that jump from that one salary schedule to another, and it will involve a large increase in that 1 year.
There's no way to do anything like that with the situation we're in right now. We have to give a 26% increase?
It's a contractual obligation.
Okay. Commissioner, Buildings and Property, 17.6% increase? Same thing?
No, this was explained a couple of meetings ago. The Commissioner of Buildings is also taking on the OEM, Director of the OEM, and that's the stipend for handling that.
Well,
We
don't-
were going to allocate 150,000, but because of our and then that would have been grant funded for 1 year, and then we would have had to absorb it. So now, by doing it this way, it's 17,000 for him and 17,000 for his deputy. So we will have that grant funded this year, but next year we have to allocate for the 34 versus the 150,000.
Isn't that normally put on another line?
That would be an accounting issue.
Okay. Now, another question. Last year, we had a $9,434,000 fund balance. We used up, I think, about 800,000 of that. Do we still have $8 million as a fund balance?
No, we have about 6.5.
So you have 6.5 as a fund balance, unallocated fund balance, yet we're looking to bond, and the bonding costs us money. And the bonding has gone up again this year. I mean, our debt service continues to climb. It's not like we're getting rid of the debt. We're getting more and more debt every year. How are we going to stop that? I guess, well, all right.
Are there any cuts you propose, sir?
Are there any what?
Cuts. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
we talked about.
yeah.
So
Do you
please.
hear?
So we've talked about 20,000 here and 20,000 there, and that's great. But we're
No,
looking at
no,
we're looking,
debt service
we're
is
looking,
13 million.
Right, right.
13
Okay,
million,
so-
okay? Debt
so-
service.
so we
4
would need to cut-
million of that
so-
is
oh.
our interest.
Okay.
Stop bonding,
Okay.
okay?
That's still we're still looking at a 12% tax increase then. Right?
Can't hear a word you're saying.
We're still looking at a 12% tax increase then. Correct?
Not with $4 million cut out of it. If you stop bonding, $4 million is just the interest. That's 10% of what you're going to collect from the taxpayers. Everybody, without that, it would be 10% less. You know that. I mean, you have to understand, when you say a 12% increase, you're not talking about the departmental charges on top of that, are you? That's a different increase.
I don't know.
Well, 21 million of this are
It's what I have a comptroller for. Is that? Can you answer that question?
when you talk, I asked, when you talk about the 12 point, what is it, 6-7% increase, that does not include the departmental increases, does it?
Yes, it would.
It does?
Yes.
Okay, so even though you're saying,
So it does include it.
not the way the budget is written. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we
Eileen Hessian. I found the budget difficult to read because there are very few specifics on it. I wasn't sure if somebody was being paid on many different lines. It was difficult. So I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts and suggestions based on what I saw. We're looking at a big tax increase, debt service, plus that other $4 million, fees on water and sewer, unpaid beach bathrooms, and as Ms. Diamond said at the last meeting, we can borrow. Not anymore. We need an independent forensic audit on the city finances. Please. If you have to borrow to make it to the end of the year, you have to stop spending. This is month 5 without a full-time city manager and a comptroller. Why isn't the council working harder on this? How many interviews have you actually held? One of my ideas is to change the city charter. The city manager still holds the same power as a mayor. This has to be changed. The city council is voted in, and they should tell the city manager what to do, not the other way around. Next, and I brought this up before, a citizen review committee should be instituted immediately, and its members should not be political cronies. They should look at each budgetary item before it is spent. For example, a simple, small one. If this committee could have looked at the $35,000 proposed for those planters, they might have asked, where will we get the money for the flowers? And then we probably wouldn't have bought the planters, and we would have saved $35,000. My next suggestion is to get back the money from the separation payouts, especially from those who have not separated. And especially from those who were overpaid. This money, I believe, was paid out illegally because it was paid out before it was bonded for. It seemed the city council was trying to hide these payouts until Mr. Bendo called them on it. My next idea, all discretionary raises should be canceled going back to January 2018. If the city council knew of our financial problems, they should have not been awarding raises. Same for new titles and status. Moving exempt to union used to need a test and time, I believe 30 days. So I think that was illegal. If our city council members did not know about our financial problems, then they should all resign. And as it shows, they have not been doing their job. When Jack came on board, he said we were in debt for $5 million due to the last group who sat up here. Less than a year ago, Jack said that he had brought Long Beach to solvency and that we had $9 million sitting in a rainy day fund. Where did that money go? We are now, I'm almost done, estimated about $115 million in debt, poor management, people not showing up for meetings, bad lawsuits, all of it shows no one's paying attention. Who is really running our city? No one's held accountable. City council rarely answers questions. We need an independent forensic audit on the city finances, and just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right.
So just to speak to the audit, Ms. Hession, just to speak to the audit, the New York State Comptroller Office is in here. They're here every year since 2011. And I did request a meeting that the council gets to actually meet the folks that are in here from the Comptroller's Office, which will happen shortly. So they are doing an audit, and they have done the audit since deficit financing began in 2011. It's the New York State Comptroller. I don't know. Sir? Yeah. State your name and address for the record.
Phil Schlitz, 365 East Walnut Street. Each department head creates their budget for their department. What I would like to see, I've seen it done in other municipalities, is that after the budgets are figured out, that each department head deducts 5%. At that point, you're asking which way to save money. That's one way. There are many others you're going to hear. But these people in back of me should be more courteous and work with everybody in front of us, okay? It's a board that has discussions, but yet it's controlled by the Democrats, and this is a political issue, and this seems like the one Republican or non-democratic person is trying to twist everything. And I'm against that. All I want to say is 25%, 5% deduction in department heads' budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlitz. Can you speak to what you did with each department?
During the budget process, the first thing I did was when I came in January was meet with all department heads and find out where their current budget was at, so I would know that we would be able to make it through to the end of the year. There was a number of departments that were more than 50% of their overtime, which causes concern because we're halfway through the year. We do have to factor in that the first half of the year is more expensive than the second half because it includes July and August, which are very expensive months for us with operating the beach park and all the summer activities. But we then got those budgets into line so that we could find some savings and ensure that they stay on target for the fiscal year. Then we went forward, and every budget was scrutinized. We did look at trending. That was a very important thing to see what we were spending for the last couple of years and what we could reasonably cut. As far as a 5% cut across the board, we probably realized a significant cut, but not an actual number, because there are some departments that really only have labor as their expense, and labor is governed by contracts. So you couldn't just do a unilateral 5% pay cut because that would have to be negotiated with the unions. So the discretionary spending is about 5%, 4%. So we, pardon? 4 million. So that if you cut all of that, you'd still be looking at a tax increase. And that would mean no gasoline, no paper, nothing.
Hi.
Hi.
I
Please state your name and
realize
address.
I'm short and it's hard to see me. Mona Goodman, 55B West Broadway in Long Beach.
Thank you.
I've sat in your chairs and I've done my time out here. And, you know, Long Beach, it's always been a struggle, but it is unconscionable to saddle the residents with a more than 12% increase. And you've been artificially making it a no tax increase budget for how many years now? And when you were discussing the bond issue last meeting, all I saw was this body kind of perplexed and couldn't answer questions because, well, Jack knew. What happened to the $9 million, $8 million, $7 million, whatever it is, surplus that Jack Schneerman was crowing about? And if you don't know, you don't belong sitting up there. So I don't agree with the last speaker, the one who immediately preceded me, but every other speaker before I agree with. And it's all about cutting the waste. You know, you have to have the desire to do it.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
So cut the waste and stop moving people around and creating these very high-paying jobs for friends and family, and get to the meat. Get to the meat of running the city.
Right.
So when I sat on the council and we were fiscally stressed, the council members took a cut in their pay. Do it. Do it.
So as
and maybe you want to speak to the exempts and say to them, you know, times are really tough and we are taxing people out of their homes.
Right.
Would you consider taking a pay cut? At least you'll be able to keep your job. You know,
So-
that's how it is in the real world. Because
Ms.
you
Goodman.
don't know. You are not there.
Ms. Goodman.
Okay?
Ms. Goodman.
Yes,
so
sir.
The only group of folks that have come to us with actual cut in pay has been the exempts. They've offered us 5 days of no pay. It's a pretty big savings. So that's a week with no pay. It's just starting the negotiation.
Nice gesture,
Right.
but it
But we're
falls
looking at-
really
but
short.
But there's 14 of them. So there's 14. So even if we eliminated every single one of them, you're looking at a 10% tax increase.
You know what?
So where would you like, where's the
I
waste
want
that you see?
I want you to do your jobs
So, okay.
and cut the waste.
Okay.
And believe me, there's a lot of it, I know. Like
I don't believe
said,
there is. I think
I've
we're running
been
pretty
in that
lean.
chair.
We're running pretty lean.
I don't think you're running pretty
I
lean
think
at
we
all.
are. If you talk to any of the
You know,
superintendents of any of the
I'll
departments,
I'll tell you where I think you
Please
should
do.
cut something.
Please do.
Stop using the Swift emergency telephone notification program for nonsensical communications. Jack was the star, so maybe that'll just go away by attrition.
I don't
but-
think we've used it once this year, but I think we have unlimited robocalls, right? Yeah. We don't use Swift anymore.
Ah, thank you. I stand corrected. Please, yes, thank you very much, David. My time is up. I ask that you please
Cut the waste.
very seriously consider what is going on in the neighborhood
I
of
got it.
Long Beach,
Yep.
because it's not pretty.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you just state your name and address?
Good evening. My name is Karen McGinnis. I'm at 102 Pennsylvania Avenue. I have two questions. First, some questions to assure that my elected city council members are getting all the information they need to make sound opinions on this budget. I would like to know if, in fact, all city council members have been given a copy of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017 audited financials. Mr. Tagney?
They're not available.
Yes, they are. You couldn't have done the budget without it. Christie?
The commissioner is correct. They're not available. They haven't yet been issued.
Why are they not available? They're supposed to be available 3 months after the end of the fiscal year.
Due to the major turnover in staff, there's been a delay.
So the state controller knows that we do not have audited financials for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
In order to vote on a budget for the fiscal year 2019, it's really helpful to have your audited financials for fiscal year ending 2017.
We're supposed to get the comptroller's report next week. Is that right?
Related to the budget, you should have it by Friday.
By Friday from the comptroller.
The current proposed budget is misleading and disingenuous. One can argue that using funds from financing and the fund balance each year is not a balanced operating budget. The 2019 budget calls for $1.5 million in borrowing for more termination salaries, totaling $1.4 million. Do the city council members have a list of the recipients? What measures have been put in place since the last city council meeting to ensure that all city council members are able to approve the payouts for the 2019 budget? The city charter says that city council members are supposed to receive a personnel roster with each budget. Have they received this information for the 2019 budget? Mr. Tagney. So that means every city council member knows the increases, exempt and non-exempt.
Yes.
Thank you. There were $2.295 million in termination salaries ending fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016, and $1.826 million in fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. Right now, the year-to-date, March 30th, year-to-date termination salaries for fiscal year ending June 18 is $1.3 million. That's $5.64 million. Plus, you project another $1.4 million next year, so that's $6.84 million. What is the explanation for tapping into the fund balances for the past few years? Fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016, it was 1.5 million. So that's where you went from 9 million to 7.5 million. Fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017, you clipped off another $1 million. By Christie's acknowledgement today, you clipped off another 1.5 million for this past fiscal year, which ending June 30th, 2018. Is that correct? Okay, so that means this past fiscal year is not a balanced budget, as Jack would say. I have a savings recommendations, please. The charter calls for $15,000 in printing costs for the publicity budget. The budget is at least $35,000 so I asked to please make that budget cut. And I can give you the copy with the city charter. What is the $50,000 in consultant costs for the zoning board?
I'm sorry, Ms. McGinnis, but I'm going to have to cut you off. There's
And
a lot of
you're-
folks here that want to speak. There's a lot of people that want to speak, and I think it's fair that everyone gets their time. Okay. So
the charter says that the printing costs for the publicity budget is supposed to be $15,000.
Right.
I admit it's antiquated, but we are going against the charter by not following it. The budget should be reduced from 35 to 15.
Okay. So
I can address the ZBA.
$370,000 is a 1% tax increase.
I also
So-
suggest that you.
Miss
I
McGinnis,
also
it's really
suggest-
not fair. I know the
also
folks in the audience want you to talk, but it's really not fair.
I also suggest that you eliminate the contingency. By doing so, you will also eliminate the need to bond for $1.5 million, which you included in your 2019 budget. Therefore, that means that each one of you know right now that in your 2019 budget, you are going to go ahead and bond again for termination salaries. So I vote that you eliminate the contingency and then you eliminate the bonding. You just saved $1.5 million. I also suggest that your revenue assumptions need to be looked at again. For the general fund and department income, your revenue assumptions are outrageous. You're projecting a 9.2% increase in departmental income from 2017 to 2019. Where is that 1.8 million in departmental income coming from? There's a lot to think about, and I really hope that all of you have the information you need to make the sound decisions, because this budget is misleading and disingenuous, to use Mr. Tagney's words.
So the one comment I would make, Ms. McGinnis, is I think we all want to budget for separation payouts, which 99% of them are for folks that are under contract obligations. But if we don't bond for them now, that just means a tax increase. I thought we.
No.
Chrissy, can you just talk about the fund balance?
Yes. Well, actually, I'd like to address from the beginning. So the $50,000 in the ZBA is directly related to the secret determinations made by people putting in applications with the zoning board. That $50,000 is immediately offset by the people paying for those secrets. So it's actually, it went up $50,000, but so did the revenue reimbursement. That's a zero net increase to the budget. There is not $1.5 million in contingency. There's $326,000. The other balance in contingency is those separation payouts. So you just can't reduce those separation payouts. There's no way to reduce 1.5 million there. The contingency in this budget is $326,000, which is less than a 0.5% of the total budget. And as far as the fund balance, the city has, from 15 to 18 in the budgets, the city has appropriated $3.6 million in fund balance to help keep the property tax increases each year a little less. You're at fund balance, which I said at the last meeting, at the point where it doesn't make sense to go any further below because you will not have anything left for emergencies should anything happen. The city has a 5% fund balance, which means on an $82 million budget, you have to keep a $4 million fund balance, and that's about where you are. So there really is no more fund balance to appropriate it. The city has an adopted policy of 5%.
So I
Sir.
I just have a quick question. You had said the FY17 year-end audit which is supposed to be due within 90 days, wasn't done due to staff turnover. We didn't have staff turnover until January. If the report was due in the end of September, what was the staff turnover?
The report was due the end of March because it's 9 months from the end of your fiscal year. So June 30th, it's due the end of March. However, the staff turnover really started last summer when I left. My position was not replaced by an individual person. Shari James played dual roles for the time that she was here. So between that and not being replaced fully, that's the staff turnover.
Mr. Mooney?
Good evening. John Mooney, 18 May Walk, CSEA President. I'm going to touch on a quick couple of budget notes and then get into my speech. On page 6, the average median income is $84,000 to live in this city. Our members average $50,000. The 180 members that we have in the general fund, which is $10.5 million, bring in revenues close to $20 million. So when people say run it like a business, we're producing. We make up 55% of the workforce and account for 45% of the budget. You cannot balance the budget on the backs of us anymore. It is not fair that the fiscal mismanagement of a select few who are no longer here fall on the back of the lowest paid workers who live check to check. This is retaliation, and it's disgusting. And the recent council vote to not pass the bond is now going to lead to layoffs and concessions. 2 people turned their backs on the CSEA. It's Anissa Moore and John Bendo. You are the elected officials here. You should be finding positive ways to help our city. Instead, the council feels the need to hold press conferences with News 12, Verizon. What is that doing for our city? Is that helping us? All of this negative attention? Why aren't we demanding FEMA give us our money back that we worked for, that we built this city where it is today? That should be the question everyone's asking. All of these politicians writing letters about what they should do, they should be writing letters to get our FEMA money. I stand here in solidarity with the police, the fire, the LBC, every single worker that works for the city of Long Beach, and every single hourly, and we are tired of being used as pawns against everybody. It has to end. A layoff to one is one too many. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Council members, my name is John C. Shepard. I am the local president of CSEA. My main office is in Jericho, New York. It would be my hope that all of you sitting up there would never do anything to hurt the hard-working men and women that make this city how great it is. In my local, along with the city of Long Beach, I directly represent 76 other municipalities in Nassau County. One of my other titles is First Vice President of CSEA for all of Region 1's 50,000 members. Another one of my titles is Board of Director for all of CSEA's 300,000 members. I am proud to say that currently we have over 1,200 CSEA members who live in this great city. That number is greatly enhanced. That number is greatly enhanced by family and friends. I cannot tell you, ladies and gentlemen, how to vote, but I can certainly tell you I will remember how you vote. And whatever you guys do, you're going to have to deal with me in the future. Thank you.
That's if they're all going to leave.
Everybody walks out.
Leave. I wanted to ask. John Mooney.
Excuse me, since my name was out there before you walk out of the door, you need to hear what I have to say about it. Right, that's my whole point. That's the whole point. But for 2 years, you've been calling me for 2 years. You've been calling me for 2 years. Mr. Mooney, can you please at least come up here so I can explain? Can you please come? Can you please come? Mr. Norman Wilson, can you also at least wait for me to answer? You don't understand what my vote was. You don't understand what my vote was because you walked out last time. You walked out on April 17th. Now you're walking out on May 1st? That's very unfortunate. That's very unfortunate.
Going to take 5 minutes. All right, all right. If you're leaving, please leave quietly. We're going to continue our meeting.
See, everybody is leaving. Everybody's leaving and we're making decisions. There are other decisions being made here and you're walking out of the door. If you belong to this city, you should still be in this room with everybody else. You're asking me to turn a blind eye to improper budget procedures? That's irresponsible. You deserve better. If you walk out of the door, you'll never get it. That's what this is about. That's why I voted against the bond. I voted against the bond so that you could get better next year. But you're walking out of the door. You'll be coming back here again begging for mercy. They're going to continue to use you as a tool. If you want to be used as a tool, you walk out the door. But if you don't, you stay in this room right now and address the issue. That's the only way we can move forward as a city.
No, ma'am, please, we can't let
Mr. Mooney.
Ma'am.
Mr. Mooney.
Ma'am, please.
Most
Ma'am.
of the city workers that work the garbage trucks and in this city, they know me. My name is Lucy Centeno. I watch you guys bust your ass. I watch you keep this city and maintain it. But I'm going to tell you this right now.
No, we can't. We can't.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Ma'am, you're not, it's not your turn right now.
Lieutenant
Ma'am,
Stark.
Ma'am, please step aside.
We have to keep decorum.
Ma'am, please step, ma'am. Ma'am.
And it's not right. Only Ms.
Ma'am.
and Mr. Bendo were willing to say kiss my
Ma'am,
ass.
step down, please. It's time for you, ma'am, it's time to step down.
Thank you.
You guys right there suck.
Thank you. If you're
evening,
leaving,
members.
please just try and be quiet. I appreciate it. Please state your name.
Good evening, Greg Kalnitsky here. I'm here on behalf of all the exempt employees in the city to help the circumstances that we find ourselves in. First, I want to thank John Mooney for his leadership and his advocacy on behalf of the CSEA, who deserve every cent of the raises they're contractually promised. They work hard for that money. And I want to thank John Mooney for his guidance and assistance to the exempts in these trying times. The exempts collectively make up less than 1.7% of the budget and are not the highest paid employees within the city of Long Beach and receive less benefits than any other category of employee. No overtime, no comp time, no nighttime differential, no uniform allowances, no terminal leave, and most importantly, in tumultuous political circumstances outside of our control, we have no job security. We are on call to work at all times with absolutely no additional compensation on nights and weekends on a regular basis, handling some of the most high-stakes matter the city faces. We have all been paying 10% of the cost of our health care coverage for the last 6 years, which is an obligation that isn't imposed on other categories of employees. All of that, taken together, means that exempts are actually one of the lowest paid categories of employees in terms of total compensation compared to the hours worked. One can only presume that the exempts are the first to be targeted purely because they, collectively, do not have a contract with the City of Long Beach like every other employee of the City of Long Beach. Despite all of that, and despite receiving less benefits than any other category of employee, the City Council has an offer on the table from all the exempt employees wherein we may forfeit a week of pay in a voluntary furlough. That means we could forever relinquish the right of 5 days of pay before the end of this fiscal year, resulting in real cash savings to the city. Savings that are not deferral of mandatory payment obligations, and savings that do not pass the buck to the next fiscal year. Stated differently, this is half of one of our paychecks that we depend on to live, gone for good, to help the city in trying times. We sincerely hope that the council carefully considers the offer that we've presented and that we're able to come to an agreement in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalnitsky. And thank you to the exempt staff for everything that you do day in and day out. Sir, please come on up.
People are just walking up. Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay.
State your name.
Okay, Allison Blanchett. First of all, thank you for the time that you spent on this budget.
Speaking to the mic.
Could you budget for better microphones, perhaps? Thank you for the time that you've put on this. Thank you, Commissioner/ACM Tagney. I know this isn't your wheelhouse, but thank you very much. I sent you all an email with some questions, and I didn't receive any response. So I'm just going to ask them here. Could somebody just verify this for me? The Director of Community Development salary is $129,853. Am I reading that correctly? Can we compare that to previous years and look at resumes, please? Okay. What is the difference between the brand new position in the budget of Director of Transit Operations in the Central Administrative Department with a proposed salary of $117,122 and the Director of Transportation in the Transportation Department part of the budget, an existing position with a proposed salary of $105,585? These are Director of Transit, Director of Transportation. That's over $200,000. And I'm particularly interested in these overlapping titles, knowing that the City Council in February hired a third-party contractor to oversee transportation contracts.
That was covered by a grant.
Yeah, well, no, it was covered by a grant, and that should be a great savings. It was covered by a grant which actually you are illegally using because the grant, I mean, well, I'm meeting with Agostisi on that. The USDOT will be looking at that. Anyways, so we've got these two positions. One is, it seems, Brendan Costello, Transportation Department. Who's that? Who's in this building that is the Director of Transit Operations? Is that Michael Robinson?
Yes, I believe it is.
Michael Robinson. Oh, isn't that amazing? Our Deputy City Manager, in addition to whatever other salaries, is going to be getting $117,000 for what does he do besides bungle, whatever the word is, our Transportation Department, and I've asked for his removal no less than 3 times. The Director of Transportation. So we've got these two positions, over $200,000 plus this vendor. My suggestion is that, as I've been asking you, Aramo, for years, to audit the Department of Transportation, because you have people in there who are political appointees. And not to mention, we have bus cuts. So, I mean, this is just insane. And I'd like to echo previous comments about no raises. Thank you.
Council, I just want to address one of our questions. The
Please.
The Director of Community Development salary is $76,125, not $129,000.
Thank you.
It's on page 57. Absolutely. So the Director of Community Development salary in this proposed budget is $76,125. It's on page 57. Okay. No, it only has one employee.
Okay, Kathleen O'Leary, 350 East Market Street, Long Beach. I
hang on-
guess
hang on
I
just-
can see that our taxes are going to be going up.
Can you hang on just 1 second?
Sure.
I'm
Sorry.
looking at the budget. It does say 129,853.
That was in the prior year. That's adopted 18.
I'm sorry, you're correct. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll remove my foot from my mouth now.
Okay, I am grateful that the budget was scrutinized. I am grateful to John Bendo for, finding some discrepancies. I'm grateful to him for voting it down. I'm grateful to Anissa Moore for voting it down. I'm basically grateful that it was scrutinized, and I think it needs to be super scrutinized from now on. I know that we have a commitment to unions that was contracted, but the oversight on it was missing, and also I think there are some concessions that can be made by the unions. Just to get historical, in the last 12 months, we've had 2 bonds because of bad legal decisions. Taxes went up. We're waiting for a 3rd bond for the tragic beach accident where someone was run over. We were underinsured, and I'm hoping that we are now fully insured so that we won't have to bond to pay off judgments against the city. So basically, we have had our taxes go up 3 times already in the last 12 months. This budget would be another increase. And then we have iStar standing in the background, asking working middle-class, seniors, disabled people to pay taxes for a wealthy corporation, and the wealthy paying $4,000 a month in rent. I think that is probably, the whole ball of wax is just too much, okay? When I looked at the budget, not as detailed as everyone else did, I saw 3 areas that I think could be scrutinized for further cuts. Maybe not for cuts, but just to be looked at. We're spending $4.3 million on sanitation, more than any other department in the entire city. We're spending $1.1 million on corporate counsel, and now I hear there's getting a $25,000 raise. I believe there's 3 people working there. $1.1 million is a lot of money, even for an attorney.
What's his budget?
The interfund risk retention is $3.2 million. Frankly, I
I'm
don't
sorry,
know.
say that again?
The interfund risk retention is $3.2 million. I don't know what that is, but you guys probably do, and I think it should be looked at. Maybe money could be reallocated from this budget. I don't make $50,000 a year like the union workers here. And you're literally, like someone said previously, you're taxing us out of the city. We're not so strong financially that we can bear the weight of all this. Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. O'Leary,
Yes.
first of all, I appreciate you picking out specific things that we can then look at. That's what we're here for. I appreciate that. In terms of the 4.3 million in sanitation, I could tell you that 2 things. One, sanitation is one of the only departments in the whole city that we actually make money on through garbage collection fees and the like. But also, our Commissioner of Public Works has come forward with some ideas on how we could maybe streamline the process a little bit better and maybe realize some savings from our sanitation. So it is in the works, and I do appreciate your comments.
Okay, I'm very happy with sanitation.
Yeah,
I've
no.
always been. I'm
Yeah.
not picking on
It's the number one thing we need to do.
But,
Just pick up the garbage.
Yeah, yes,
Right.
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sir, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Michael Graham. I live at 49.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Michael Graham. I live at 49A East Pine Street. I have 3 questions I'd like to ask. Is there anywhere in the budget that you plan on hiring the part-timers? Why does a part-timer have to work 11 or 12 years before they get benefits? The labor law states in 90 days, if you're not going to make a person full-time, then release them. You guys don't practice that. How can I live working part-time for 11 years? Is there anything in the budget that you guys plan on making people get benefits or have their benefits and not work 11 years?
I don't think so at this time, no.
Why not? This has been going on a long time. I'm 55 years old, grew up in Long Beach. I think you should put some new policies in it. How can people live off of part-time pay? No benefits. We have kids. And I'd like to thank you, Ms. Moore and Mr. Burno, for voting no. And I have one other question. Why don't you take the money back that you gave the people that are still working? How does that work? How does that work? How does the assistant city manager receives a paycheck and gets another paycheck? How does the council guy, you just gave him $125,000. For what? Then there's always no money. This is ridiculous. How do y'all allow that to happen? You could pay someone $125,000, but you can't make a person full-time?
I understand.
Is there anybody that could speak to that question? Is there anyone here that could speak to that question in terms of the process?
I'm sorry, the process for?
The process for people moving, making the transition from part-time to full-time.
How's that work? You do that, right?
It's a case-by-case basis, that's all I know. Right? It works on a case-by-case basis.
It's not a case-by-case basis.
It does work on a case-by-case basis. As a matter of fact, Mr. Graham just got rehired by the city in a part-time position because he was laid off in the 2012 cuts. So we do evaluate when we can't. We could hire all the part-timers and be in compliance, but then we would blow a hole in the 12% tax increase. So what we do is, as a person attrition's out, we evaluate whether we need to fill a position, and then if so, we do fill it. But right now, our sanitation is running at a profit, and if we were to absorb the entire part-time staff, we would go into the red.
We made a couple full-timers. Yes. We made a couple, right? How many do we make?
Are we in the red?
I know. State your name and address.
Good evening, Sam Pinto, Long Beach Professional Firefighters. I would have to agree with the sentiment of the gentleman just now. You guys, this is not a healthy ship. What are we doing right now? We're having the room was divided between labor and residents. And as a labor representative and a resident, I find it embarrassing that this is how our budget is being presented. Are we actually having a budget presentation? Or are you coming and asking the residents to read a sheet of paper, ask questions about cuts? Or are you going to get up, grab a presentation, and tell us what great services that our tax dollars are going to? Can you answer that?
Yeah, no, this is for us to hear
You're
from
answering
you.
other people.
I'm
The answer is
sorry?
you guys have to do a budget presentation. Where's the actual presentation? Where's the stuff you're going to present to all these taxpayers and workers to show the value in the workforce and the value in our hard-earned tax dollars? Where is it? It's not fair. It's embarrassing. As a resident and a person who works here, it's embarrassing that we have a divided room of people, of residents, of taxpayers going against each other. You're pitting labor against taxpayers, and a lot of the people are one and the same.
So I disagree with your characterization.
I can't hear you.
I said I disagree with your characterization. It's natural that there's
It's natural. Machiavelli says it's natural,
It's
not
natural
here,
that there's
not in Long
conflict.
Beach.
It's natural that there's conflict between what
There
we pay
shouldn't be
for and
conflict.
where we cut, right?
No.
That's natural.
Maybe in your world. I don't think there
no,
should be a conflict
no.
like that.
How about in the real world?
In the real world,
That's-
okay.
Right? So we don't want to cut employees.
We don't want to
right?
do cuts of
We
employees,
don't want
no.
to cut employees, but the taxpayer is demanding that we cut taxes,
You're
right?
standing
So it's
and
natural
you're giving,
conflict.
You're giving
it's
exempt
very basic
employees.
101.
You're giving exempt employees $25,000 and $30,000 raises while threatening to cut people who live paycheck to paycheck. That's natural.
No, that's not what I
What
said.
is?
You're putting words in my mouth, sir.
I'm asking you a question.
You're putting words in my mouth.
Okay. I see right here that we have a new position in the city clerk's office. A new position, $84,000. Why are we creating that position?
I'm sorry, which position?
New position, city clerk's office, $84,000. Why are we filling that position?
Because we needed more positions, I would assume this is...
You're getting rid of a deputy city clerk for $68,000. What's
Right.
up with the nonlinear change?
Why don't we talk about concessions the fire department's going to make?
You want to
wanna
talk about concessions?
that?
Listen, I'll talk about concessions the fire department, Mr. Labor. Obviously, your true colors are coming out. It's fair. You have a bone to pick, and it's obvious.
I have no bone to pick, sir.
You obviously do.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
You gave the exempt employees who work very hard over 2 and 2.5% raises over the last 8 years, correct?
How much?
2% raises. Cost of living increases.
Mr. Pinto,
why don't you tell
they
the
follow the
audience here what
CSEA.
your salary was?
I work every day. Listen, Miss Diamond, if you want to come after my,
Why don't
I work
you
every
say-
single
No,
dollar.
Actually,
I-
none
my-
of us
No, you do not work every day. You
Excuse
work
me.
one on
If
4
you
off.
remember, I was the
Excuse
one
me, civility,
last
please.
meeting. Hold on. I
My
was the
time is
one
being
at
paused.
the
I love this
last
debate.
meeting. Excuse me. I was the one at the last meeting that took the difficult decision to vote in favor of a bond so that we didn't lay off any employees. I didn't want to vote
That's
for that
not what
either.
the bond was
And
for.
that is
No,
exactly
that's not.
what-
Wait, wait, wait.
But there were
Questionable
other
layouts.
employees who came to the table
Oh, my
in an
goodness.
effort to make it so that nobody had to be laid off. Whether they were exempt, we just met with
How
the
was your
exempt
review of those
employees.
those payouts?
I
How's
don't-
the review? The city council had 2
We've
weeks.
all asked for a review.
No, you do a review.
We
You
have
you
all
voted
asked
for it.
a
You should review it.
I'm not an independent review board. Absolutely not.
You
we
voted
should
in
have
favor of something without
we
reviewing
should have,
it?
and when I said I voted in favor of it, it was not. It was with an understanding that those payouts were to be inspected and reviewed. I specifically said it when I voted.
You already paid
and
them
we've
out.
all called. And to the extent that they can be recollected, if they're improper, then they should be. And I believe that every single member of this council has said that.
This is a manufactured fiscal crisis.
No, it's not,
Yes,
Mr.
it is.
Pinto.
It's a
I think that you
manufactured
know
fiscal
that.
crisis. You're giving
we're still
raises
borrowing.
to employees that don't have to be.
No, it is not. It's not manufactured
You got a
when there
practical
are
resident
employees.
who are clapping.
There are employees who unfortunately have to go to bed fearing that they're going to lose their job.
I've
And
lived that
was
way for
not
years.
That was not something that I was willing to be okay with.
By the way, we're still borrowing. We're still borrowing for those
still borrow,
payouts.
guys. So why are you
We
giving
found-
raises?
We found money in
What?
another
You
bond.
found money.
We
That's fine.
found
Are
available
you
funds
still
in another
giving out
bond.
raises and
But
creating
it's still
extra-
a bond. We're still bonding for it.
I understand you still have to bond. My question is, are you still filling these positions and covering up the questionable payouts for the separation of service that never occurred?
None of us are covering up any payments. President Aramo himself spoke with the comptroller's office,
Right.
and they're coming in and doing a review of all of the payouts.
2
If
weeks
they're
ago, he's
improper,
complaining that people are shutting down
every
government.
single
Now he's
one of
quiet
us-
about it.
Every single member of this council is in favor of an outside evaluator to come in and look at those payouts. Every single one of us.
Before or after
And
you
we
paid out?
still stand
Okay,
for
so back
that.
to my question. You guys
But it
want to know
was
about
very
cuts?
clear at the time that we weren't aware of that.
You guys are living in a world of cuts, right? You're asking for cuts. Where's the budget presentation? Honestly, where is the presentation to help show the value while we're getting a 12% tax increase? Where is it?
I mean, the budget is available.
You get a piece of paper. No, you got to get up here. You have to have pride in what you're offering, and you tell people what they're getting. That's what you should be doing. The school's doing, the library's doing, everyone else is giving presentations, and you guys are standing here pointing at a piece of paper with hidden jobs and hidden moves in personnel. Okay. That's it.
So you want a PowerPoint?
I couldn't hear you.
PowerPoint. Got it.
PowerPoint. Oh, real presentation.
Got it.
And so I do ask that we should go over the new created positions that are being put in. And I also ask that positions that are grant funded should be line item as grant funded as well. And I want to close with this. Definition of extortion: the practice of obtaining something, especially money, through force or threats.
Line item for grant funding. She already.
Lucy Centeno, 225 West Park Avenue. First of all, I want transparency. Only 2 people on this board have come out all over this city for that. Number 2, everybody up here gainfully employed, other than the city council? You're all gainfully employed?
Yes.
Give up your salaries, put them back in the budget, and let these people be able to go to sleep at night knowing they have a job. The reason I say that, I've been here many, many times. I stopped coming because of the BS that was being given out, okay? In the 70s and the 80s, during the Bradish regime, we went through the same BS. You're going backwards. This is 2018. You're supposed to be fixing things, not screwing them up. And you've got people on pins and needles. This city is losing its residents that have been here all their lives. They are not being able to live a life that's comfortable for them anymore. On top of which, you make very, very snide comments, or you make people feel like they're beneath you. I'm not
Just-
beneath you.
No, I apologize.
I'm not beneath you.
I don't think
I
that.
live
I
here
sincerely don't
53
think that.
years, and
I
let me
sincerely
tell
don't
you
think
this
that.
right now. I'm not going anywhere. And when I do go, it's because I want to go. And I will vote for the person that's right for the job, not somebody who has pull because their family members have something to say so that they can get on the board, or somebody paid somebody. I didn't ask for that. But I will tell you this. I've been patronage with Citibank for 28 years. Bounced 2 checks, raised 4 children as a single parent, took kids in my neighborhood on my dollar out to the city, to the island and everything else. I have 10 credit cards, never ever filed for bankruptcy, never been evicted. All my bills are paid. I want to be the city controller.
Legislator Ford, would you like to come up? Would you like to come up, Ms. Ford? Yeah. Is that why you were waiting, or? Yeah.
Denise Ford, 36 Ohio Avenue. And I have
Welcome,
to
Ms.
say, Lucy is
Ms.
definitely a
Ford.
hard act to follow. I'm going to be brief. We're all forced with economic constraints. But there were many issues and suggestions that were brought up by many of our residents here. And they should be considered, especially those spoken by Mary Velasevich and Eileen Hession, who both of them were right on target. Yeah, the unions did give concessions, and it's heartbreaking that they have to. I think that it's time that we stop trying to balance our budget on the back of the working men and women who are the backbone of our city, and start looking at those people that are exempt, that are non-union. You could do shared services. You could combine department heads. Listen, the county, we have the same problems. We are without money. We have financial constraints. We have a NIFA board that's overseeing us. So they've taken some jobs. They've taken 3 department heads and combined it. They got rid of them. They laid them off. They were non-union people. They were patronage jobs, all right? So they took 3 titles, each at $125,000 each, got rid of them, and brought in 1 person at the time, and head of human services, and gets $95,000 a year. These are real savings, that we can accomplish. And we have to also look, when you have your vacant and funded positions, when you have like jobs that are CSEA titles that really have no employees in them, don't put patronage people into them. Don't move them from one job and put them into civil service positions. I think that's reprehensible. It should never be done. Civil service, to me, is a very sacred system. And I look at this, and everybody has to take a test to be able to qualify to get into civil service. Those lists are established. Those people pay to take those tests. They wait and wait for years to be able to get these jobs. It is not, and I say this not only for the city, for the county, for the state, for anybody who does this, that takes a civil service and use it as if it's a piggy bank to hide people in. I think it has to be stopped. When you talked about the deficit that was left by the previous administration, it was addressed. It was $12 million. You remember in January 2013 and January 2014, you collected 2/3 of that money because we divided it into 3 years. So we paid 2/3 of that. In 2014, in the mid-year, the state then allowed the city to be able to bond the money. So even though we only owed about maybe $4 million, we ended up taking a bond for almost I think it was $14 million. You probably could correct me if I'm wrong. So when you look at this, that we then ended up bonding, and that was what got the state to do an annual budget review, because we have that bond. And just to let you know, the comptroller is not auditing your budget right now, because according to the letter that was sent to Jack Schneeman and your city council last year, he said the scope of our review does not constitute an audit under generally accepted government auditing standards. They do not offer comment and make specific recommendations on public policy decisions such as type and level of services under consideration to be provided. So they do look, so all they're doing is they're just doing a budget review. They're looking at the budget that you're proposing, they're looking at your expenses and your revenues. And yes, the comptroller's assistant, Gabe, did say, I know that he offered to meet with you. He cannot meet with three or more of you because then it's an open meeting. But yes, he did, I'll wrap it up. He did extend an invitation to both John Bento and Nissa Moore to meet with him, and he will take some questions from some of the public. I can pass on to him for different things that you want to see. We have to bring this city back. All right, this is terrible. It is a disgrace. Just bear with me for one more minute, because you know what? I live here. I've lived here for 38 years. I've been to numerous city council meetings. I cannot believe what has happened to our city. With iStart and even with this, where we're pitting, once again, union people against the residents. This has got to stop. This is an embarrassment. And I'm looking to each and every single one of you. You better all start sharing information. Don't start telling me, like, when they had these separation payments, I did ask Nissa Moore, and I did ask John Bento, has any information been given to justify the $108,000 that was given to Jack Schneerman, when everybody who takes a look at that payout cannot understand how it could be anything more than $52,000. You cannot hide behind the seats that you're sitting up there. You are out in the public. You owe it to the public. Own up to your jobs. Own up to these people. And let's get this city back on track. Thank you.
Legislator Ford, if I may.
So,
Wait, Legislator Ford?
Legislator
Wait,
Ford, I was told that it is an audit is what they're doing, and maybe that's not the right word. That's the word I used, and that's the word I was given. But also, we did ask, in terms of reviewing the payouts, we did ask them to review the payouts, and we've given them the drawdowns and the termination pay sheets to the comptroller's office for the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. We are seriously looking at it. I don't think there's one council member up here. I know you specifically were calling on Councilwoman Moore Bendo, but there's not one council member up here that was happy to find out about the way it had been done. And it's something that, while we can't address right this minute because we have the budget, there are no payments being done at this time unless they're going to be contractual from a union. And moving forward, we're going to get to a point where that's going to change.
And I appreciate that. But let's go specifically. And I wasn't at the city council meeting, but I've watched everything on video. And I know that you're going to give, and I understand it could be just their terminology, but the comptroller will be doing an audit once this budget review is over. That he has said that he's going to come in and audit the city.
Does it take 6 to 9 months or something?
Yeah, and that will be done. But just let's be clear. The question is that I'm asking is, I understand you have to give the payouts, you have to give a lot of information to the comptroller's office. What I'm asking for is the sheets that were used and to come up with the payouts that were given to the people who are not separating from the payroll, and even for our city manager. I want to see, and I think everyone in this building wants to see, that we want to see in black and white how you computed, how he was able to get $108,000 when we have a city council member who can only justify and figure out that he should only get paid maybe $52,000 or $54,000. That, to me, should not be something that we need to wait for. These people were paid, and there has to be associated documentation that justifies it. All we're asking for is give us that information, and maybe you'll restore some of the confidence that we may that we can have in you. That's all I'm asking, and we should have it tonight. It's not a
Legislator Ford, wait, Legislator Ford, I have a question for you. First of all, I want to thank you for voting for the IME with the city for the bus transportation, but we haven't received the money since 2015. It's my understanding that it's either tied up with NYFA or some county approval system, but there is money that the city is owed for the years of 2015, 16, and 17 for $225,000, and that would go quite a long way at this point.
And you know what? That brings me to something really important, if you would just, bear with me for a second, because let me explain about that, okay? Because the previous administration, I'm not really surprised to a certain degree that we're here, that last year we were told we had a $9 million surplus, and lo and behold, here we are. We can't even pay our workers, okay? And we want to lay them off, and who knows what else. We ended up with the buses, even though we paid $225,000. It has been systematically with the previous administration, and you weren't part of it. So they just didn't seem to want to bother to fill out paperwork that was necessary. They could, even though when you reach out, even as myself, I don't care who's sitting up here. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I will work with every administration. I will do the best that I can, because I want to work for the residents, all right? So even with that bus, I want to tell you something. We had a hearing on that, and we had a Commission of Public Works, all right? And it turned out that they were stymied. They could not believe that they would send the contract to the city every year for that $75,000. And guess what? Whoever was head of the transportation department and the city manager couldn't be bothered to fill out something that has been filled out for every year ever
But
since
it's
the
my
N69
understanding.
buses were
All
running.
I'm
But
simply
no,
asking.
No,
wait, wait,
no,
Legislator
let me
Ford.
finish my
Let her
statement.
finish.
So what happened is, we had to like pressure them and constantly get in touch with the city and say to them, please fill out this paperwork, because guess what? We now owe you $225,000 and we want to pay you, okay? They couldn't be bothered because you know what it goes like, as the kids go? Boring. That's exactly what Jack Schneerman felt about the finances of this city. Couldn't care less about collecting money from what monies that was due, and now we're stuck here wondering what we're going to do for the future.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, and that's why I'm asking if we can work together to ensure that that money is paid so that we can restore the bus service.
And you know, and I hope so.
It's my
because-
understanding. It's
and-
my understanding that all the paperwork is done, that all the approval is with the county, and that it's not. It's
Well,
a
you know what you could
NYFA
do?
issue.
I'll give you a recommendation. Why don't you call the new controller and ask him to release the funding?
Fair enough.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
If I could, excuse me, if I could just address one point. Legislator Ford, thank you, and I think we all join and we're all on the same page. Everyone up here wants to see how the payouts were calculated. Everyone wants to see an audit of it. The immediate issue was how to fill the gap and then go back almost as if there was a car accident. The immediate issue, stop the hemorrhaging, then see who was at fault. That was the mindset. Tonight is to see how to go forward, but not forgetting that we want to look back and see what happened, by whom and when.
So, and I want to just echo what you've just said, and that's why I have serious concerns tonight, being that the words were used tonight manufactured crisis. If indeed we are all on the same page about it and we all agree that this is what's happening, then why were 2 council members pointed out tonight by our CSEA union?
I'd also like to, and Ms. Ford, for your benefit, I've asked for all the payout sheets. Haven't gotten them, but I've asked for them. I can't answer that right now. But I want to address this $2.1 million bond that keeps. I want to address the $2.1 million bond that keeps coming up tonight as a source of who threw who under the bus or who doesn't care. Quite frankly, a 12-year-old with a calculator could have seen there was something wrong with it. But that's fine. I'm not, there's all likelihood people didn't have the information they needed to make an educated decision about it. But there's an interesting reason you haven't seen it come back onto a council agenda since it happened. Our bond counsel took a look at that bond and said, absolutely not, after the fact. And there's even questions if it was even legal. So, and I'm not doing this, I'm not saying there was malice. It may have just been people didn't have the information necessary to make the decision. But that's where we are now. It's a simple fact that we have dealt with years of there were a lot of hands in the cookie jar, and now the cookie jar is empty. So what we're dealing with now is, quite frankly, a tax increase in a budget that, quite frankly, sucks, and we could put that in the minutes, and the potential for layoffs. And the problem is this is something we all have to solve together. It has to be solved together because there is no pretty solution here. We have people that want $1.50 worth of services but only want to pay $1 for it. We have people that don't want layoffs, but we don't have enough money to pay them. That's where we are right now. And it's going to take some very difficult decisions, quite frankly, for the 5 of us sitting up here, And it's going to be things that you people aren't going to like, the workers aren't going to like, and none of us are going to like. But that's where we are right now, unfortunately. So what I would personally like to see, I know I came in with 50 questions as a starter, but I said I was going to hold mine off and because I wanted to hear from people tonight. I would actually like to hear people come up here tonight with their ideas of how we can fix this. Because coming up and telling us, you can't raise my taxes 12%, I get it. I get it. I'm in the same boat. I live here too. Help us fix this. Come up here and give us some solutions. That's fine. And let me just address that for a second. You're right. You're right. Lucy, you're right. But we have a systemic problem. You know, cutting flower pots, cutting here, there. We have a systemic problem. We need to overhaul things, quite frankly. We need to change the way we do business. And that's going to mean people might have to accept, if they may have to pay more for what they have if they want to keep it. Or you might have to make decisions about what you might be willing to sacrifice not to pay more. And that's where we are. And the same goes for our city workforce as well. They have to be part of this solution as well. I know apparently I'm off the Christmas card list for the CSCA, but they have to be part of the solution as well. You're right. We need to look at everything. That's fine. But I'm just saying we all have to do this together because this is going to be painful for everyone, like it or, whether we like it or not. Good question. I'm in the middle of my house lift right now. I'm emptying out my bank account right now, lifting my house. So.
All right, so just to echo what Councilman Bendo said, that is why we're here, to hear your solutions, what you're willing to live without, what you're willing to pay for. If anyone, I know the exempts keep coming up and they're all standing here tonight. There's 14 of them. If we got rid of all of them, it's 1.7% of the budget. So there needs to be more than just that. Even that's an exempt position. Go ahead, sir. Please state your name and address. We'll get this meeting back on track.
I'm sorry. Jim Kirkland, Long Beach, New York. To begin with, I want to say something, and it's no disrespect to the CSEA membership and the additional members of, I think they amounted to 1,200 people. The council represents about 35,000 people, not just 1,200 people. So if they find something that's wrong or needs to be questioned or looked at, I think that takes precedence over the minority membership in the community, and it's got to be for the betterment of the community. So I don't blame John or Anissa for doing what they did at the last meeting. Secondly, I have to say when I come up here and I come to these meetings and I listen to them, I sometimes, especially tonight, feel like I'm at a management meeting of a candy store. Because it's like you all just sort of like love to give things away to friends and family, and whatever little thing comes along that sounds like a great idea, let's just put some money to it, instead of looking at the bottom line at the end of the year, what it's going to actually cost us. For example, I was going through the budget, which hasn't been presented tonight, and I saw that health and welfare represents about 25% of the budget. Now, health and welfare usually represents 25% of salaries. So you're way beyond that kind of a number. And so it just demonstrates how much you're giving away. I don't know whether it's a collective bargaining issue or whether it's just generosity on the part of the city. But, I mean, that's something that needs to be looked at. And the other thing I looked at was the overtime for the police department. There used to be at one time what they called the 100 Club, which was all the members of the city who made more than $100,000 a year. Now, that's a ridiculous thing when you consider, I went through the budget, and there was over 20 that make over $200,000 a year. And when I counted up all the other people going down the list on just the first presentation, which was 100, there was 100 of them. I stopped at 100, and they all made into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the top earner is a retiree who pulls in over $450,000 a year, which is, you know, a lot more than I make. So, you know, there's some need for oversight on the part of what's going on, going down the road. The other thing I noticed was regarding the employee benefits. The employees get not only their insurance paid for, and I'm an insured individual, as I'm sure most of you are, but there are also co-pays. There are Part B premiums. Well, they get those paid as well. Now, it seems as though there's absolutely no out-of-pocket cost for them for anything. And I don't know if it extends to family or just them personally, but it seems like an overly generous benefit package for people. And that would be a big concern, you know, cut right there that could take place. So I guess my time is up, so I don't want to belabor the issues, but I think there's got to be some closer scrutiny in treating this not as somebody's little mom and pop stop, but it's a $100 million corporation. It's not a government operation. It's a big business, and you got to treat it like a big business in order to make it run on an even keel. Anyway,
So
thanks.
just to answer, sir, that is all contractual, and it is one of the things that I think when we do bargain with all the unions, it's the first thing that is asked for continuously is for some participation into the health care.
The first thing, every single time.
Please state your name and address, ma'am.
Jennifer Maldonado, Long Beach, New York. Sorry. Sorry. Jennifer Maldonado, Long Beach, New York. Everyone who has stood here before me, they're so knowledgeable. They have more experience with city council than I do. So I would ask that everybody refrain from making any facial expressions, because I have seen that quite often tonight, actually, and I do find that to be unprofessional and rude. And so I just would like to say, please maintain your poker face, that's all. Okay, so I just had a couple of questions about, for instance, the first thing that glares out to me is the Corp Council's salary. So I see there's $152,299 for 2018, and then it jumps to $177,688 for 2019. Now, my understanding from what I've heard here, I think that's what everybody was talking about when they said $25,000 raise, but why? Can someone answer that?
What was the question?
Why the raise?
Do you want me to answer that? Or
Yes, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Directly, yes.
Sure. I actually obtained that raise last year, and that was an inducement to stay when I received a job offer at the end of December last year. Actually, I received several offers and pretty much accepted one. I was induced to stay and received a raise as part of the package at that time.
So is this package an at-will employee status, or is this a contractual?
I'm always an at-will employee, yes.
Okay, so then you can forego the raise then? Yes or no? Yes or no?
I can't answer that in a yes or no response, ma'am.
Why not?
Because I have to talk, because...
I'm not asking if you will, I'm asking if you can.
Listen, do you want my answer or no?
This is what I'm talking about, the rudeness.
All right, that's fine. You made your point, thank you.
No, there is no point. I'm asking you, yes or no?
No, you made your point. You want to hear my response, that's fine.
Well, now I'm telling you that I do
No,
want
no,
to.
we're done.
Okay, so then what my suggestion as a lifelong resident would be to please not give the raise. It seems like it's not contractual. And not only that, but anything that is contractual can be amended. So I'm sorry, would you like to speak into the microphone?
I think I'm comfortable responding to that. I was here in
Ms.
December.
Simon, Ms.
Wait,
Simon.
I'm going to answer your question that you just asked.
On his behalf?
You just asked a question. I can't answer on his behalf. I can answer on my own behalf.
Okay.
While the decision wasn't mine specifically, there was a concern, particularly when he said that he was going to leave and go to another municipality, that our council, at a time when we were at a time when a number of our staff had been leaving, that it wasn't safe or very good judicial advice to have our Corp Council leave the city at the same time. There's a number of pending litigations where the city has quite a bit at stake. everybody here is aware of most of them, and we all thought, I believe, and the city manager at the time, that this was an important decision to be made in order to retain our legal counsel. Like him or not, I happen to like him, but there are those that don't. But that decision was made in order to keep him here.
Well, now
we
taking-
believed that that was the decision that was appropriate at the time.
I understand. Now, taking the personal aspect out of it and
No,
looking
none
at
of
it
this
as
is personal.
No, but let me finish, please. Taking the personal aspect out of it, because you did make a comment that you do happen to like him. Taking the personal aspect out of it and looking at it as in a business way, okay? Was there another senior ACC who could have stepped in and acted as an acting corp counsel?
I did, look, the final decision was not mine, but I don't believe that that's the case. At a time when our city is faced with a number of large litigations, it did not seem prudent at all to lose our lead counsel.
Now, jumping into the commissioner of building, because that's another $20,000 that we could forego on spending. That would be my suggestion right there. So $119,354 for the budget in 2018 to $140,000, $350,000 for the commissioner of the Department of Buildings. Why the jump? Is that also contractual, or is that at will employee status?
Yes, as I answered earlier, he took on the OEM job that we were authorized to hire for about $140,000, which would have had to been grant funded for the first year and then be absorbed by the city government. Instead, we took $38,000 and we split that between a director of OEM and an assistant director of OEM, so that they're doing extra work, and the impact on this current budget is only $34,000.
So there's no way to freeze this at all. There's no way that they would accept to freeze their salary increase, because here's the thing. I'm a former government employee in the city, and in my third year, I made less money than I did in my second year. Why? Because there wasn't enough money in the city to do that. I'm okay with that. I could do that, and I worked overtime. I worked nights, I worked weekends, and I didn't get paid overtime or anything like that. So you're telling me that nobody on the higher ups in the city can take a salary freeze, a wage
Maybe
freeze?
like 5 days.
No, that's when I don't mean 5 days. I mean for an entire 2 years. Like in 2008 when there was a hiring freeze, and then there were people who did not even get raises for 4 years.
If I may, the exempt staff is a very dedicated group of individuals that run departments, that run the city. So if you want to get rid of all the exempts, get rid of the city manager and police commissioner. I'm two of them. And then who runs your police department? Who runs your city? You get rid of your legal staff.
But
Okay.
how
I'm
does-
done with heckling.
But how does a salary freeze translate to getting rid of someone? It's not getting rid of them. It's not terminating someone. It's saying, let's not increase your salary for a couple of years. Let's just see and how we can stop the hemorrhaging, as you stated earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. State your name and address.
How you doing? Patrick Garces, 225 West Park Avenue, over 50-year resident. Everybody knows me. Commissioner, I'm going to ask everybody. I'm not going to ask you to put the bowling alley back on Front Street. I know some of you don't know where Front Street is. Okay? That's how long I've been here. Front Street is Shore Road. Used to be Front Street. They changed the name. But Mr. Bandito, you said what? Come up with some good suggestions, right? To make some money? Okay. That's your job, but you guys. But I said it when the Republicans had the party. You wouldn't be here now dealing with this. You wouldn't be increasing the property tax. Put the parking meters back on Park Avenue. Put the parking meters back on Park Avenue. And I got something to tell you. I spoke to the business owners. And they're not opposed to it. They're for it. Because hey, people are parking in front of the business, in the plazas, everything. You have to asphalt it. You have to send the Long Beach Sanitation to clean it up. Costing taxpayers a lot of money here. Everybody, this is the only city in this country where there's not a parking meter. Even Freeport. Freeport has a quarter meter. Now watch this. Lancer, all their employees park for free. The company's making millions of dollars. They own 2 buildings there, from Lafayette all the way up to Monroe. Free parking. on taxpayers' dollars. Now, I calculated at $2 a car at an hour, like they have the machines. They'll come out, they'll put them in for nothing, and you pay them off. And you'll get that money. I spoke to the business owners, and they're for it. They're losing business because people park there all day long, move their cars around, watch for the specials. No disrespect, they're doing a fantastic job, the city workers, the specials. There's only so much you can do. The chalk on the tire don't work anymore. A little bottled water and a thing, we erase it. That's it, you know? So I'm going to tell you right now, I calculated from Laurelton, even Laurelton, Laurel Luncheonette, all the restaurants, they say the people park there, there's no parking for their customers. Watch this. You're losing $20,000 to $25,000 a day. No meters. You believe that? $25,000 a day. Guess what? We wouldn't be here. And he's got $500,000, right, Commissioner? Right? You got $500,000 you found somewhere, supposedly? Okay. You got the Beach Pass money going on sale soon? What is that going to bring in revenue? Another $1.5 million, close, give or take? I voted for the raise on the increase when the Republicans had the party, but when I told them about the parking meters, they all looked at each other. I'm just telling you now, you've got to do something. You can't kill the taxpayers. You can't. You can't kill the taxpayers and the workers here. You can't.
I know.
You know?
Mr. Arcese.
Wait, all right, I understand. I fully understand. As for the commissioner, maybe you gave a parking violations. Let's get an impound. We got plenty of property back there. 2 police tow trucks. Police officers in the tow trucks. Start towing the trucks. Why oust it to somebody else? Put the money in the city pocket. I'm not mad.
All right.
I'm not blaming you guys. I'm not blaming anybody. But guess what? Police, and my PD's got them. Everybody's got their own police trucks. Because you know what? Keep the money in the house. Don't give it away.
All right. Mr. Arcese, I want to thank you for bringing a tangible, something that we can talk about. Parking meters is definitely something that's on the table, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm thanking you. I appreciate it. Please state your name and address for the record.
Robert Marking, 456 West Penn Street. So I'm new to this community. I moved here from Manhattan, so honestly, the property taxes here, in comparison, I have to tell you, they are much higher, but I understand the impact. I've lived here since November 2016, and I have heard a divided community here tonight. Shocked me, actually, because I don't know all of these issues yet. I'm learning. Everybody in this room has responsibility, and I have not heard that individually said by anybody that got up here. I've heard accusations back and forth. I'll tell you this is the safest city I have ever lived in my life. Thank you. How anybody makes it on $50,000 a year, I have no idea. I can afford this 12% increase, good for me. But what I expected tonight, and I haven't heard, to ask the public to come up, like me and others, come up with parking meter ideas and all, it's all great. But you sit in these seats every day. I expected to hear 2 things today. One, a 12.5% or whatever the increase was. I understood that. Maybe it's the time, maybe it's not. But what I didn't hear from this council was huge proposals on what the opposite would be. To put it to the public, to come up. Everybody's got a grievance. Everybody has an idea. Small bits and pieces. That's great. Some of them you've already been considering. You said it. But where is, if we had to cut $5 million, what would it look like to the public and for everybody in the room to be quiet while they listen to that? So they can hear the truth? Now, there's lots of issues that you have. You've obviously had corruption in the past. I mean, I almost am questioning that I actually moved here without knowing it. Okay. Everybody needs health insurance. Everybody needs employees. We have got people here angry at everybody's salary when not one person here who heard any of those salaries, many of us couldn't imagine living on them? So the real question was, why didn't you come to us tonight with real proposals, whether they got accepted or not? And asked everybody, like the gentleman said, a PowerPoint, whatever. I wanted to hear the alternatives from you. I don't begrudge you your salary and that they saved you to not go. The fact that you don't have employees scrambling out of the city already, but everybody's worried about if somebody makes 5,000 more, 10,000 more, yeah, that adds up. That is, like you said, not going to fix the budget. But what we didn't hear was, what would you honestly do? And then let us come back to the next one and hear it and come back and say, no, we're not going to take $2 million out for this. So I found tonight disappointing. As a new resident, I'm not here judging your work, and I'm not here judging the long-term residents. I can't. I'm not in that position. But this is the safest city I have ever lived in my entire life. And that is thanks to something. So don't lose sight of it, everybody. If you got to cut $5 million, know where you're going to cut it. Don't begrudge everybody, the union. I'm speaking for 5 people who didn't get up tonight at 3 minutes each. But let's see you come and dare with real proposals. Ones that don't necessarily affect the police and the unions, ones that maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't heard it all. But come and show us big ideas, and let's see whether this city wants a 12% increase, because maybe they will accept it, maybe they won't. But from what I heard tonight, I wouldn't have any ability to make a decision on that. And that was a lost opportunity tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And what I would say is, if you just give me 1 second, is we had decided as a council to listen tonight and to take notes. And then we were going to meet, and then we have the second budgetary meeting. But I understand your point, and it does make perfect sense. We did ask for some sort of menu, like what does $5 million look like? What would you cut? If we cut $2 million, what does it look like? If we had sanitation 1 day a week, which I'm not advocating for, but if we had sanitation 1 day a week, what would that look like?
Right,
but what we were planning on doing was bringing
exactly that. You
right,
missed
I
the
understand.
opportunity
I
by
understand
doing
your
it the
point.
way you always do it.
I understand your
We're
point.
going to let the public come in, so the confusion itself leads to it. Maybe this could have been a 2-part council meeting.
There is a second budget
But
hearing
you
in 2
have
weeks
the
from tonight,
opportunity
but we
to
did have
try it
a missed
differently.
opportunity. I
believe
understand.
it was.
I understand.
really do. And yes, let's hear what it's like to go to trash 1 day a week.
Right.
Let everybody figure out how to recycle better.
Right.
And stop wasting as much.
Right.
But bring
I
it to
appreciate it.
us.
I
Maybe
appreciate it.
you'd be surprised that people will accept 1 day a week.
Right.
And the for-profit. I don't know that.
I
So as an
understand.
answer, I'm not answering for anybody.
Right, right.
Let's-
I really appreciate
then
your
let
comments.
us get back up here with another one of these meetings where you do that.
Right.
And then let's see how the public is going to react. That would be amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Please state your name and address.
My name is Paul Butler. I live at 120 West Beach Street. My name is Paul Butler. I live at 120 West Beach Street. There's a topic that was brought up at this meeting, it was brought up at the last meeting, having to do with the payouts. It was discussed, it was brought up, it was discussed, it was brought up. Nothing has been resolved. Who is going to be accountable for resolving this, for addressing it? For getting the sheets, finding someone who has the sheets, who will take possession of them or copies of them and figure out if they were done correctly. Everybody's upset about the fact that people were paid excessively, or they believe that people were paid excessively. It needs to be resolved. It may not be that significant financially, but it represents possibly corruption, which nobody wants to see or hear about. Nobody wants it to exist. They want to hear about it if it does exist, and they want it to be resolved and reversed. So who is going to take responsibility for it?
Well, sir, there is an ongoing audit right now by the New York State Comptroller, and they're going to be receiving the exact information that that you're talking about probably this week.
You're talking about probably what?
Probably this week. But that's the first step, is to provide the requested information to the New York State Comptroller's Office.
Okay.
Just to answer your question.
Okay, who was our prior controller?
No,
No, I'm talking about the New York State Comptroller. They're auditing us right now. I'm not
Wh-
talking about our internal
Does the city have a chief financial officer?
an acting one. Right now, yes.
Okay, who is that person?
It's Erin D'Antonio.
Is she a CPA?
I don't believe so, no.
Is she a chartered accountant?
I'm sorry?
Is she a chartered accountant?
A chartered account? I'm not following.
Pardon?
I don't understand your question.
I'm trying to figure out what credentials, if somebody were to become the chief financial officer of General Motors, they would have some credentials.
No question. No question. But she's an acting comptroller. And
The-
our search for the comptroller is ongoing.
Okay.
Sir, if I can also respond, right after the last meeting,
Quiet, please.
Thank you. Right after the last meeting, we came together as a council and together asked for there to be an audit of whatever was paid, and contacted the state comptroller, not the county comptroller, but the state comptroller, in order to look into it. It should be an independent review, not somebody who's here,
I agree, it
not
should be the
somebody
state
who
controller, not
works
the
for
county
the city,
controller.
or who is. It's not the county controller. It's the
Absolutely.
state controller.
Yes. There's
Okay.
no independence there,
So
obviously.
we all decided that as a council. We met quickly after 2 weeks ago, within a few days, and we decided that as a council that was the approach that we were going to take.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Mike Delory, Long Beach.
Thank you.
I don't have specific ideas, but I put packages together for you. Each name is here, so you could take it, read it. Mr. Frazier, I have one for you too as well. Up top right, there is the. I don't expect to. You have answers tonight, but what I would have expected is once the controller left, either engage with the CPA firm that reviews your books and maybe have them assist in the budget. Maybe that has happened. I don't know the answer to it. But last year when I was here, the city manager did a budget presentation, and I emailed Ms. Hightower about 50 or 60 questions 4 or 5 days before the hearing in consideration for her time to research, review it, and possibly answer hundreds of people's questions. I gave the same list I just gave to you to Ms. Hightower. Some of these questions have already been addressed. Some of them have been answered. The one question, I got a couple of questions for you, and I could give you a lot of advice how to better raise revenue, some of which I mentioned to the former city manager. Nothing was done. Whether he looked into it or not, I don't know. He never got back to me. There's revenue sources. I think you need a budgeted citizen advisory committee. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would help, that they would welcome it. I don't think you tap into the citizen and the talent here that you could possibly do. You're not, and when I say you, I'm just saying you're not getting the talent and the community involvement that is out there. Trust me, there's a lot of people that are very talented. So let me move on, because I know I'm limited with time. In the federal aid account A0040, I would estimate we should be receiving at least $3 million this upcoming fiscal year, and yet I think it's maybe, I don't know, 300 and something, 315,000 proposed. Nobody has a crystal ball, but if we're looking to bond for $4 million to close out some projects later on tonight, there has to be a match somewhere. So if you're spending it, there's got to be a revenue source, and I think we need answers from representatives at FEMA, the governor's office, the people who are involved. These are questions that have to be asked and answered. And cut me off if I've had enough time. Okay. If Ms. Height, oh, look, my last, I want to give some other information to you. I will just read it, Mr. Fraser, if you don't mind, for the council. I'll just read it quick and I'll depart. Passage of the budget. The budget shall be adopted by resolution, and attached to the budget and made a part thereof shall be a personnel roster, which shall include the position or title of all employees of the City of Long Beach, together with the department that they are assigned to and account number to which their salaries shall be charged. In addition thereto, said personnel roster shall contain the current salary of said employees, and you could read the rest. This is really to give to possibly the newer council members that may not be aware of the procedure. Maybe it's for current council members that don't know the procedure or maybe not refreshed. Thank you very much for the evening. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delory. Name and address.
Jordan Farkas, 370 West Olive Street. We can no longer deduct any tax increase based on the Trump tax rules. I understand the 12.3% increase. You all know the school tax increase is here. iStar is looming. But I'm a stock trader, and I'm trained to just look at the whole big picture. And the big picture here that I'm seeing, what happens when we get the final judgment for Haberman? Then what do we do? Because this 12.3, I mean, you're telling everyone here to eat it. You've heard some people say they can't afford it, but that's a major, major lawsuit we're facing. What do we do then? What do you tell the city now? What can we do? I know I'm looking at you, and I know you don't really have a response, but that's the response we all have on our faces because we all know what's out there.
Right, you're absolutely right, and that damages inquest is coming up in October. And right now we put together a pretty impressive team of experts and lawyers to defend the case. At the moment, that's all we can do.
I understand, but that dwarfs 12.3% because that's something that pushes the city way past the edge. It's money that we just don't have, and I don't even think we can borrow it.
But you'll get no argument that the exposure is very serious.
Right. I mean, we've spoken offline, and you know, I've told you repeatedly to just say, look, we don't have it, and that does push us to municipal bankruptcy, and that's a scary part.
If I could,
please.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I don't think the message tonight from this council or anyone in this room is that anyone wants to eat the 12%. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. We're looking for each and every way, and we're sincere in the request for suggestions, parking meters, anything. But the reality is, even if the budget proposed was 1%, the result of the Haberman lawsuit would still be catastrophic.
Correct.
So it's two different animals at this point. So tonight we're focused on the 12 to see how we could handle what's on the plate in front of us right now. The Haberman, we're going to have to see how that unfolds, but we're all on the same page. No one wants to see a 12% increase. No one. No one wants to see the judgment in the Haberman suit. But this is what we have control over collectively tonight. So that's what we're looking to.
Okay, well, big picture, I'm scared. Okay, and if you saw a massive room full of people, as you did earlier, with scared people, you know, imagine something that Commissioner Tagney is going to have people standing outside saying, we're full. Okay, because that's what's going to happen, and it's a scary part. Okay, I thank you for trying to work your way through this, but when we can't borrow $2.1 million, can you imagine if the judgment back to 2003 equates to $100 million? Big picture, that is scary. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sorry. Come on up, ma'am. Please state your name and address.
Hi, so my name is Wendy Meridian, and I live at 461 West Penn. This is my first meeting, other than I'm sorry,
Thank
this is
you
my
for
first
being here.
council meeting, and I'm not going to say that I'm well-informed in many things, but I do have a question about, there's major work to go ahead, right? And we need somebody to the point of keeping our corporation council here that's going to be dedicated for the long run. So my question is, what is happening with finding a permanent city manager?
So we had interviews not too long ago, and we're continuing that process. The last few weeks were caught up with the bonding issue and now the budget, so it just kind of gets delayed a little bit.
Okay, but if this is going to happen, like the groundwork's being laid, there should probably be the person who's going to execute that groundwork. And with all due respect, you're doing two jobs. Do you think you have the time to dedicate to this there's a huge amount of work to be done? Can you do both those jobs, or should the search really get going? Is the search going? Are you taking resumes, or is that happening?
We did interviews. Second round interviews we've done, yes.
Okay. And so Commissioner Tagny, I guess that's the correct, do you feel right now that you have the time to dedicate to two positions?
I do work an inordinate number of hours to handle both tasks, and I promised the city that I would take it with no compensation until they found someone, and I will do my best to honor that commitment.
Okay, so is there, just in the ideal world, do you have a timeline when you would like to see somebody to be part of this process from the ground up?
I mean, I'm hoping after we get through the budget season.
Okay, which is what?
Which is this month.
This month?
Yeah.
Okay.
This
All right.
month is the budget season. That would be my hope.
Okay.
I think that if I may, I think that we're at the stage in the process where we've narrowed it down to a number of individuals. There are still some council members who have a few questions that they want answered. It's a very difficult decision. As you just mentioned, it's an enormous task to run a city, in particular in the situation we're in now. And everybody's questions need to be answered before a decision could be made. But we've had a number of meetings where we've interviewed a number of different individuals, even on a weekend when that was the only time we were able to get together. But I think that we're narrowing down the search, and we all hope that we would have an answer and a selected individual to be voted on by the council in the next couple of weeks, as soon as we get past the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address, sir.
Dave Garfinkel, 535 West Broadway. I can't help noticing during this meeting that you guys seem to be overcome by the enormity of the task with which you find yourself charged. One thing, do you guys look at how other cities are run, or similar cities in comms? Because I'm looking at some of the numbers here. I don't know. I've never run a city before, but I run businesses, and so I look at how other businesses, similar businesses are run. So, do you guys do that, or look at similar enterprises?
Comparable cities, yeah, especially with relation to like the police department and stuff like that, yeah, for sure.
'Cause I know it's unusual for a city of our size to have its own police department and such, and maybe that, and so that might be a little illuminating. So I guess that was one thing, but I was, this has been mentioned before, I don't want to belabor the point, somewhat astonished at, I guess, the deer in the headlight look that I sort of see coming from here. Once again, yeah, I guess it's been said more eloquently, but I am somewhat astonished by the lack of ideas and the fact that you guys seem to be somewhat overwhelmed. And are you seeking maybe outside counsel from other people that might, you have like support groups that you can reach out to or anything like that?
I mean, the original plan of the evening was to hear feedback from the residents on this public hearing, so that's why.
Okay, but there have been a number of simple questions that have seemed to be somewhat baffling to you, so so that's what prompts me to ask this. So that's not an unusual thing, right? So do you guys know people you can reach out to in similar cities, or have groups or people.
Just to give you an example, we have someone coming from NIFA to give us a presentation of just some ideas that they instituted in the county, and tries to create revenue and decrease costs. So, is that what you're talking about? Something like that?
From where?
NIFA, the Nassau Interim Finance Authority. Is Nassau County?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe some more reputable types
It's an
of
oversight board.
enterprises, yes.
It's an oversight board.
Yes, okay.
If I can just respond to your question, I think each of us go through a number of different things as we decide how to approach a budget. I can speak for myself that we reach out to other colleagues of ours, whether they're elected officials or department heads, both in the city as well as in other municipalities that are similar to ours. We do have a unique municipality, not only because of our location, but some of the services that we provide that are not provided in other municipalities. But there are similar municipalities throughout the state we can reach out to and get counsel on how, and I don't mean legal counsel, but just kind of collaborate with other individuals in order to understand ways of tackling challenging issues. So, and I think we bring all of that to the table, our own backgrounds. There's a councilwoman who's very involved in a college, and she brings that with her. And all of us have a background in different things, and we bring that to the table in order to understand and kind of develop ways of tackling this issue. But we did decide as a council that we were going to hear all of the residents, and then there's another presentation in 2 weeks, and that we would have more substantial understanding at that point.
Okay, it just seems peculiar that there's a lot of things that you have under consideration, yet it strikes me that a lot of the questions have shown that you're not really clear about fundamental things that would drive those decisions. So that's what leaves me somewhat concerned about that. So, what can I say? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Colleen McCown, 518 West Walnut Street, Long Beach. First, let me say, you are in a thankless position. We all get that. And possibly, maybe some things should have been done a little bit more politic or a little bit more polite. However, you can sense the fear that people have. One of the words that came out, I missed the last meeting, and one of the words that came out was that we were being threatened. We would have our essential services, policemen were going to be fired, firemen, etc. It really isn't a way to get the rest of us behind you in how we're going to clear this. So I think that's really a cruel tactic to try and have people governed by the fear of losing their most essential services. It's really distasteful.
Excuse me, if I could just say, there's only 4% of the budget that's discretionary. So the only way to get lower than 11%, if that's even close to the number, Christie, is to make severe cuts to department personnel. That's the only way. That's where our expenses are. Our expenses are employees.
From the numbers presented, it does seem there's got to be a lot of fat somewhere else. I mean, some of your departments, some of the people actually said they're the ones that are producing some of your revenue, the sanitation, et cetera. You receive money from us for that. You know, it just seems.
No, I said that.
That would not be where any of us want to see anything cut. Obviously, maybe your non-residents coming to use the beach are going to have to pay a way higher fee than they are currently. You know.
They can only pay double what the residents pay.
Okay.
There's a lot of rules that I've been dealing with.
I would pay more to go to the beach. I'll be perfectly honest. I think my husband and I paying $65 or $70 for an entire summer where I'm there every day, it is a really big bargain, and one I greatly appreciate. So I don't know where maybe some monies could have been found. I question whether or not you have explored all of the monies you could have gotten as a result of Hurricane Sandy. Did you apply to New York Rising? Because I don't know if you've received money from them, but on behalf of a building within the city, I got $2.2 million from my residents. I heard something mentioned before, and that I would like answered. FEMA hasn't paid everything to the city? Who's
So
going
we're-
after them?
So
If we're not filling our paperwork to get paid from the Transportation Department for 3 years, that makes me think someone dropped the ball on figuring out your paperwork. I'll do it for you. I presented a stack like this to New York Rising.
we're down to about 4 or 5 million. I don't know if the commissioner still hit 4 million.
But still, 4 or 5 million would pay your bond.
So we're down to 4 million, and all the paperwork has been in for over a year. Is that right?
And is
more
anyone
than a
the
year.
squeaky wheel? I had to
Yes.
call New York Rising
But we were
twice a week.
We were very aggressive with New York Rising and got an enormous amount of money. Not New York Rising, but FEMA and the federal government and the state. We were really aggressive and got an enormous amount of money. I can't speak to the figure, but I'm guessing our commissioner could. But if you want to continue, and then I'll
All right, well,
have him.
that really was one
No,
of the
we
answers
were really
I most
aggressive,
was
much more
looking for.
aggressive than some other municipalities in terms of our comparing ourselves to other municipalities, like the last gentleman suggested. How much have we received?
So far from FEMA, we've received over $102 million for all the projects. Unfortunately, you cannot use FEMA money to cover your operating expenses. But some of our operating expenses covered projects for FEMA while we're waiting for reimbursement. It's a 12-month to 18-month turnaround before things are filed. I just want to make one thing clear, because we keep talking about this $4.1 million that FEMA owes us. FEMA really owes $400,000 of that. The other portion of it is from New York State.
Okay.
And the way it works, we get a 90% reimbursement from FEMA, and once we close out a project, we then apply to the state, and then the state pays us the 10% once FEMA has paid us. We did speak to FEMA about the outstanding money on the $4.1 million, and they have moved our request up to the front of the list. We shouldn't really blame FEMA for the delay on this.
But we're still owed $4.1 million.
We still owe $4.1 million, and we still have other projects that will be closing out that FEMA will still be reimbursing us for. However, we're very careful. We have over 100 PWs that we've done for FEMA.
PW.
PW being a project work category for various projects. Some of them we haven't closed out because we want to be sure they're done, because once we close a project out, if we find out there's still some funds that we need, we would not be able to get those funds. So we go, the deputy commissioner and myself go through those very carefully and try to make sure when we do close out a project that we're absolutely 100% sure we're not going to need any more money for those projects.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers
Okay,
some of
it
your
did.
question. Great.
It did, because
Okay.
that, when I heard that, I'm
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Egan, name and
Oh.
address.
Nora Egan. I don't have any suggestions to help with the budget, but I do have something that is relevant to the budget. If you could just clarify whose signature is on Jack Schnurman's payout, which is part of the budget. If I hand you the sheets, can somebody clarify? Thank you. I just want to know whose signatures
There's a
are
few
on.
signatures on there.
I do not recognize the signature, but I do recognize the first name, Michael, and I would have to assume in that position would be Michael Robinson.
He's a department head.
I don't know who that is. Yes.
So underneath it says comptroller, payroll clerk,
No, department head.
and city manager, but
I
guess
think,
Jack
could that be?
sign those. It's the document that John had earlier on Facebook.
I don't actually know.
Okay.
I can't make any of them out. I think that's Sherry.
So it
believe
looks
on the
like-
controller line it is it's Shari James,
It
but
looks
I'm
like
not
the previous
100% certain.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Sure, the controller, on the line for city controller, I believe it's Shari James, who was the former controller.
Okay.
That's the only one I really recognize, though.
But surely we should know who signed off on this before you would give him.
Oh, I
Um,
have no, I was not advised of any of
No,
this.
no, I didn't mean you personally. I meant as a city. Before you give away that kind of money, you would want to know exactly whose signature it is that's signing off. Because the other signature is the city manager agent, and it's either Mr. Tagney or Jack Schnurman, correct? So it's not
I
your
wasn't
signature.
city manager at the time. It's
That's
definitely not
my-
me.
Right, so the city manager on December 15th was Jack Schnurman.
Yes.
So he gets to sign off on his own payout?
I don't see his, I know his signature. I don't see his signature there.
Right, so whose signature is that then in the city manager spot?
I don't know. I don't recognize everyone's signature. If you ask me about police officers, I review all their reports. I know almost all their signatures because I see them regularly. Until January, I didn't see people's signatures. And since I've been acting city manager, I've been signing everything. So there'll be no reason for me to see this.
1st of January.
2nd of January.
2nd of January, sorry. But so this was signed on the 12th of, or 15th of this, 15th of December. So we should be able to find out who signed documents. I mean,
Oh, I'll definitely find out by tomorrow morning, but I
Okay.
just don't know right this minute.
Actually, the department head signature I do recognize. That's Thomas Larson, the payroll supervisor.
okay, all right. And so then my other question about the document, I hope I took a picture. It's effective the 1st of January 2017. So can you just explain what that means? He resigned effective the 1st of January 2017?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's on the second installment and on his,
Yeah, that seems to be a typo. I think it should probably be 18.
but to make it like legal, shouldn't it have been notarized, like initialed and notarized?
Though I've never seen those forms notarized before, but then again, I don't see those forms before they're actually used to pay separation pay or accrued time.
So, okay, so it's a typo, but it just, there should be like some checks and balances. Somebody should have, 5 of you, Mr. Agostisi, Mr. Tagney, like should have looked at this before, like, and not just for Jack, for everybody who got a separation payout, or
So, Ms.
though it's
Egan,
not
I know
separated.
this has happened already, but I know all 5 of us council members have spoken about it, and it's something that after the budget season, we're going to reform how this is done in the future. It's already done, for the police unions, that whole mechanism is already set out. But for our non-union employees, I think the 5 of us are committed to coming up with a solution on how we want to see either drawdowns of time or separation pays, payments made, and also hopefully we can budget for them so we don't have to borrow for them.
yeah, but is it possible that this is like an illegal payout because it wasn't like signed off properly
So
on, and he is part of like
all
why
this
we were
is
bonding to?
going to the New York State Comptroller for the last 7 years or 6 years, something like that, of these payments that none of us were aware were happening to this
But
capacity.
you should have been aware. You've been sitting up here for,
Mhm.
I think I've been involved like 6 years, 5 years, 6 years? I'm not really sure. So you should have been aware of what was going on. Like if these are happening, it's your job to represent us. You get voted in time and time again, don't know why. But this is part of your obligation to us. Like you can't just, all right, Jack, here you go. See ya.
We've
Enjoy
never
it.
even
You
seen
need
these.
to like go after him
first time I
or
saw
anybody
this was
else.
John
How
printed
is
it
this
out.
your first time to see this?
Tonight was the first time I saw this form, yes.
So then
My
why?
signature is not on it.
But the bond was brought up to pay to make do right on these
Right,
payouts.
Right, which we're
So
still
you did-
borrowing for.
But you, I'm sorry.
Which we're still borrowing for.
Right, but you didn't check why we had to borrow. You didn't look at the documentation, like, oh, he's getting like X amount, she's getting X amount, and see who signed off on all of them before you're like, oh yeah, let's just
We-
borrow 2.1
We
million.
received a list of all the payments made prior to the meeting, yes.
Just a list of like names, Norwegian. You didn't like look at this, the unused vacation hours, all of this. You didn't do
No.
for every single person is what you should have been doing.
And I'm
We-
saying you
we're-
because
we're-
you are the president. You may,
We're in a position where we need to trust the folks around us. We don't look at all the commissioners' project worksheets for the $102 million. That's just not how it works. So we need to trust the people that are around us, yes.
and I'm in the position of being a
I'm sorry?
taxpayer. I'm in the position of being a taxpayer and a voter
Yeah.
of having to trust my council.
Right.
And you're not showing that I can trust you.
I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
John Ashmead,
Thank
Beach
you.
Street, Long Beach. I actually wasn't going to talk about the separation payments, but I have to tell you, Council, that I'm completely baffled by the answer that. Hello? Can you hear me now? I did not plan on speaking about the separation payouts. There's a lot of questions. I haven't done the calculations. I have no idea. Either will have been earned and properly paid or not, and that'll be figured out. I think for the sake of the city, it should be figured out immediately, not 6 or 9 months from now. What I am baffled about, though, is that the people sitting up here don't know whose signature's on that piece of paper when this has been an issue for 2 weeks. That is absolutely just blows my mind, and it's shameful. People think there's no transparency in this city. This is exactly why. You know, it'll be a proper payment or not. How could no one here have looked at it in the last 2 weeks and said, gee, who authorized those payments? Jack Sherman, Rob Agostisi, whoever on there. They'll be proper or not. But that, to me, knowing it's an issue in this city, to sit up here and say, we haven't looked at it and I don't know who's, it's shocking to me. It's grossly negligent. Unbelievable. So let me get to the budget. I've waited because my questions were going to be boring compared to the fireworks that were going on. And you may need to have Ms. Hightower answer this, but I just have a few questions about the budget, the 18-19 budget. I understand it, and it's a very difficult budget to read, and I'm in the financial world, but I'm not a budget expert. I read it as saying the city expects, may I turn to her? Is she out here, Ms. Hightower? I read it as, and if someone else here knows, let me know, that it shows bond revenues expected in the 18-19 budget of $1.8 million, 1.5 for bond anticipation notes, and 291 for sewer serial notes. Do I understand that correctly? So I just want to understand, is that today the total expected bond financing that the city expects to do as of today based on all the information they have for the 18-19 fiscal year?
It's all of the borrowing they expect to do for the separation pays expected in the 18-19 fiscal year. It's specific to separation pays.
All right. So that 1.8 is just for separation pay
Yes.
in 18-19?
Yes.
Is there someplace else in the budget where I'd see, because what I'm trying to determine is how much other borrowing the city is doing, and I couldn't find anything after looking through it several times.
Most of the other borrowing that happens in the city happens through the capital budget. The capital plan is, I believe, being offered at the next meeting, the capital plan. So that's where the other possible borrowings would come up.
So just to relate it to the next item on the agenda tonight, I think it's the next item, is the $4 million tax anticipation note. First of all, is that for 18-19 or for 17-18?
It's for 18-19.
And where would I find that, or what would that be part of in this 18-19 budget that I have here?
The only where you'll see it is in the Rantan interest account in the general fund. So the only
show
cost
me
of that borrowing.
on the 18-19
Absolutely. If you give me a
where
second,
I
I'll
would
give you the
see
page.
that, 4 million? Thanks. While you're looking at that, can someone tell me, because there's some confusion, I went to New York State Comptroller's website just to find a balance sheet for our city or to understand what the debt is. As you know, when things are not clear to people or not in a simple place to find it, that spreads rumors and people don't really know what's going on. What is the total debt of the city today? I will tell you that the New York State Comptroller's website says at the end of 17, it was $116 million. Is that accurate? Is it something different? And is there someplace on the city website where I would be able to find out what the total debt is on the city?
I think Christy will have both answers.
Well, as far as the total debt on the city, it's reported every year in the annual financial statements. So that would have been, the amount that they're reporting would have been as of June 30th, 17.
I'm sorry, so when will we see the current debt, what the total debt is, or where can I find it?
It's not really reported it's only reported in the annual financial statements.
Well, can you tell me what it is?
Off the top of my head, no.
Can you promise to get back to me?
Of course.
I'll reach out to you, and is it, if the comptroller's website says at the end of 17, so that's December 31, 3.5 months ago, it was 116 million. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And just so you know, the interest associated with the TAN is on page 55. It's either RAN or TAN. It's the same type of borrowing. So it's actually the fifth line from the bottom. It's $80,000.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Just which
absolutely.
line?
So it's the fifth line from the bottom for $80,000. The city expects to borrow $4 million. The expected interest rate is 2%.
I'm sorry, I'm not asking what the interest rate is. I'm asking where's the $4 million borrowing?
Well, again, it's a short-term note. It's not, there's no expense associated with borrowing except for the interest. So you won't see $4 million
So
coming
you
into the
won't
budget.
see- all right, so that's something that would show up on like a balance sheet though, but not in here?
Right.
Okay.
So it's just
So
$4
that-
million that'll be borrowed for a short term and then paid back in full.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ashmead. Come on up, state your name and address.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Jay Gusta, Long Beach. Couple of things. I got a million in them here, but I'm going to hold my tongue on a couple of them. I raised at the last meeting when you guys were discussing the $2.1 million bond issue, the issue of accrued time banks that are owed to many hundreds of city workers, and whether or not you guys had a handle on how much debt we're talking about here. Doesn't appear in your budget. But it's out there. We all know it's out there. Obviously, we got bid on the ass to the tune of $2.1 million of it last December. How much unbonded debt is out there? How much unbonded debt do we owe to our workforce right now? Nobody?
I think it's an impossible calculation, Mr. Gusser, because that time is still accruing as we speak.
Okay, but right now it's budget time. You couldn't sit down and say, okay, X number of employees, X number of hours, X number of rates, and come up with a number?
I'm not involved in that budget process, but I
Okay,
can tell you this.
I
Which
got
I think you know, but also you have to understand something that I believe President Aramo mentioned before was that you either bond it or you increase taxes to a level that many might deem unreasonable. Those are the two choices.
But wouldn't a good starting point be knowing how much money we're talking about? You guys are all sitting there giving me blank stares. You don't even know how much money it is. This could be $50 million in obligations that are hanging over the city's head, but it's not appearing in any balance sheet. And then from time to time, some workers will decide they want to cash in. And you guys are running saying, you got a bond, we're going to have to shut down city services in order to pay these people. How do you run a city like that? The other thing is your math. You guys proud of saying that there's only 14 exempts and that they comprise 1% of the workforce. That means there's 1,400 employees at the city. I also heard tonight there's 180 CSEA, 28 UFA, around 82 PBA. That's 390. Do we have another 1,010 or whatever the heck the number is, members in the city workforce? No? Anybody? Basic math. You said that 14 is 1% of the city workforce.
Okay, they compose about 1% of the city budget. They compose about 4% of the workforce, the actual people.
Okay,
They're only
great.
about
So-
1% of the expense of the workforce.
So we were just playing with the numbers a little bit.
No, as far as the expense of the exempt employees, it's about 1% of the budget.
Okay, 1% I was told, not 4%. So let's dispense with that nonsense. The other thing is, Agostici's raise. You guys got to know that this is a subject near and dear to my heart. $25,000. You guys basically said that other people were courting this guy, and you had to pretty much sweeten the pot to keep him on hand. This is a guy who missed filing an answer in a lawsuit.
Mr.
that
Gusser, if
cost
you're
the
talking about the
taxpayers
Haberman, if you're
$50
talking
million.
about the Haberman case, Mr. Gusser, what you're doing right now is actually defamation.
I'm
So
sorry?
I just want you to understand that.
Yeah, I'll take my
Excuse me.
chances. I'll
Excuse
take
me.
my
Yes, it
chances.
is.
You want to sue me? Bring it.
Oh,
You-
okay.
You want to sue me? Bring it.
Well, I seem to win the rest of them, so maybe I will.
Be my guest.
So, Mr.
Be my
Gusser,
guest.
Mr.
Let-
Gusser,
let's
excuse
talk
me,
about-
excuse me,
let's
Mr.
talk about
Gusser,
how- let's talk
excuse
about
me,
real
Mr. Gusser.
solutions
No,
to the
excuse
city's-
me. You just accused me of professional malpractice. That is defamation, Mr. Gusser. I had nothing to do with the Haberman case, which you know there is a decision on this topic. Go read Justice McCormick's decision.
So sue me. I invite you to sue me. I'll be happy to.
Twist my
Second thing,
arm.
in terms of reducing expenses, look, you guys want to cut back. There are potentially illegal monies that have been paid out. What, you're telling me clawbacks, as per Ms. Agostisi's self-serving advice at the last meeting, that money's untouchable. Once you pay that money, properly or no, you cannot get it back. That's complete nonsense. If you guys gave me $1 that I wasn't entitled to, I'm sure that we'd be in court fighting over that $1. So to suggest that you can't claw that money back is just absurd.
That's not what I said, Mr. Guster, and you mischaracterized my remarks. What I said at the last, what I said at the last meeting was that it was exceptionally difficult to do, but the city would have to hire an accounting firm, perhaps a tax lawyer as well, to get it done. It's a very
That's
complex
not what I
budget.
heard, and I don't think
And
that's what
I can
anybody
tell you-
behind me
I
heard.
can tell you that exempt employees who attempted to give that money back were told that it was not possible at the time.
In the meantime, we are on the hook for I don't know how many millions of dollars. Mr. Agostisi, I maintain it is your responsibility. Your corp counsel, the consultants and the outside counsel you hire, you're responsible for their actions. You can try and deflect, you can threaten to sue me, you can do whatever you want to do. Bottom line is, if you own that, that's on you. And you guys are considering making this guy your city manager, you're crazy.
Thank you, Mr. Gusto. Please state your name and address.
John McNally, Long Beach. Good evening, everybody. Shifting gears a little bit. I liked our recent transplant from New York City. He spoke how process didn't. Sorry, I'll readjust. So our recent transplant from New York City sort of spoke how a process breakdown led us to this really feel-good meeting tonight. I would posit that process breakdown has led us to where the budget is tonight to some degree as well, and to the general tenor of our city. So I have 3 real quick, easy fixes that I think you guys could move tonight through unanimous consent if you so choose. They're all really easy, transparent, good government fixes that 98% of local governments on Long Island employ that I've never really understood why the city did not, so I'll throw them at you real quick. Number 1, so we're having a second public hearing on the budget next week, or in 2 weeks, sorry, and then voting on it immediately afterwards, correct?
Maybe.
So, but that's the typical standard in Long Beach. We hold a public hearing and...
Last year we added an extra meeting.
All right, well, I would suggest that we do the same, not just for the budget, but for most things wherein possible, that we can separate the public hearing by 2 weeks from the actual vote on it. I think it allows, the public's comments to get digested and answered, and serious, issues that they may have raised resolved, and discussion amongst the council that you guys might have. It doesn't put you on the spot to make a bad or tough decision, or a courageous decision, as some have remarked, when there's real issues at play. You guys could do this unanimous consent tonight. Number 2, specific to the budget, it's my understanding that if the budget is approved, or it's not approved by the city council, that the city manager's or acting city manager's budget automatically goes into effect. That's awful policy. It's an abdication of responsibility for the city council. I would posit that we should put forward a resolution that says an austerity budget goes into effect to really hold the council to task. All non-essential functioning goes into play. And number 3, in transparency, and this one, I'm just going to be really sort of straightforward about this one and plain, and do it in a benign way as possible. I would love to see the city council have regularly scheduled open working meetings in between our regular city council meetings. And I'll leave it there. I think you guys know where that's coming from, though. And specific to the budget, the most basic and fair starting point is, not 1 cent in non-contractual raises if you're asking residents to pay $400 a year extra for 12.3% raise. That's all I got. Thanks.
So I just have one question, Mr. McNally. You mentioned an austerity budget and non-essential services. What would you consider non-essential services?
I think that's above my pay grade and not up to me, but I think Mr. The acting city manager, said that it's whatever percent of the budget, it goes down 4% or 6% is what he would consider austerity. It's up to you guys to define what non-essential is. It's not really me.
Okay.
But that's what schools do. It's what most other government agencies do. So, thanks.
Mr. McNally,
I'd just like to point out, I actually sent an email on April 2nd asking for a resolution to be created to do precisely what you just said. There was not consensus among the council about moving ahead with that.
Did Stacy give us an opinion that, excuse me, that's not my recollection. I think our corp counsel gave us an opinion. It required a change to the charter, and that's how it was left. That was my recollection. It was an inquiry because we know that that's what school districts do, and we were told it would be looked into. We were also told it would be too late to do it for this year because it would require a change to the charter. That was my recollection. Mr. Bender, was that incorrect?
I have to look at my email. I'll do that now, actually, but it's possible, yes.
Okay.
Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak on the budget hearing? Okay, seeing no more hands, I close the hearing.
Okay, our second public hearing is for a local law amending the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding sewer rents.
This is pretty straightforward. The sewer rents and the water rates are supposed to be balanced in the water fund and the sewer fund. We were running a little low on the sewer fund, so the only way we can capture any kind of a value for sewer is to multiply it through the water rates, because that's the only thing we measure. We measure the water coming into the house and then project an equal value to cover the sewer cost. So the sewer rate's going up 0.05%, which is roughly $3 a month.
Okay. So I open the hearing. Anyone from the council have any questions? Is Christy gonna speak about anything? No. I was just waiting to see if anyone from the council had any questions, but come on up, sir.
I'm just trying to figure this out. So there's going to be an increase. I'm sorry, Roy Lester, 72 Boyd Street. There's going to be an increase of 5%, you say?
0.05.
Percent?
5%? 5%.
Yeah. But yet, I'm looking in the revenues, and the revenues don't seem to go up with the metered water sales now. Wouldn't that show up in the metered water sales? Where would it show up?
It's a sewer increase only. Water is not being increased.
So
You have to look at the sewer
it's
rents.
tied to the water, but it actually goes into the sewer.
Goes into the sewer rents.
Okay, so in the sewer rents, it's the change from 5,058,000 to 5,311,000
Which is 5%.
is the 5%. Okay. I just couldn't figure it out when it's tied to the water. So the water's not going up?
No.
Just the sewer tied to the water?
Yes, and
What
the
is-
only way we can do that, the only thing we measure is water. We don't measure the sewage coming out.
Right, but
So-
what is the logic if you're using the same amount of water?
It's more
The-
expensive to treat sewage than it is to treat.
Theoretically. And how's that going to be affected once we're
Wait,
with
did you
Bay
understand
Park?
that part? That
You
it
what?
costs more to treat sewage than water.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out the cost of treating the amount of sewage we have and then reverse it back to kind of like a user fee. If
Right.
you use a lot of water, then
Right.
you discharge a lot of water, so you pay a higher rate. If I use a little water, I discharge a little water, I pay less.
Okay, and how will that be affected once we're with Bay Park? Do we have any idea?
I don't think we will be collecting any longer, because I think the rates, the sewer rents go to the county once they take over the operation.
So
Is that
that
correct,
we
John?
would,
Well, I think that's going to depend until we finish the IMA with the county and how that's going to be decided. The county has not decided yet how they would pass the rates on to Long Beach customers. It looks like what they would try to do is absorb it into the rates for the entire county. And obviously, treating at a plant that treats 70 million gallons is a lot more efficient and a lot more economical than a plant that treats 4.5 million gallons a day.
so at that point, we could potentially be saving $6 million?
Well, you would be saving $6 million in sewer funds to the city of Long Beach, but you would be paying something to the county.
Well, wouldn't that come out of our taxes, separate taxes? Not the city?
I don't know how the county has, we have not finalized an IMA yet. Our attorneys are working on that, and there's a lot of issues in terms of how they want to absorb it. They could absorb us into one sewer district out of the 3 that they have, or they could absorb us into the entire county. Those things are all still being negotiated with the county.
And Mr. Miranda, this increase, is it also going to pay for the upgrades to the plant as well?
Right, we're under consent order to make certain upgrades for the plant to reduce the amount of ammonia and amount of nitrates that go to Reynolds Channel. And as a result, we've spent in the last year under consent order about $2.5 million upgrading different portions of the plant to better remove nitrates and better remove ammonia, and also to dechlorinate the water after we chlorinate it to remove bacteria. It requires us to dechlorinate it, which is another process. But in all, this all benefits Reynolds Channel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, seeing no hand. Oh, wait. Mr. Assis? This is specific to the...
Would it be feasible?
Specific to the charter?
Patrick Arcese, 225 West Park Avenue, 52 years here. How's that? All right, listen. Would it be feasible to oust our water department to American Water? They're a big, big company. Sewer and treatment, American Water. Would it be cheaper and less of a burden to the city officials? What do you think? Did you ever take it in consideration to call them in and say, listen, we do this, it costs us this much. How much will you do it for? You don't have to sell it.
We haven't.
Lease it. This way you could take it back. What do you think? Good idea? American Water.
John?
They're all over.
Well, actually, the Nassau County sewer plant is run under an operation and maintenance agreement with Suez, which is a national water company. But the real goal here is to remove all the discharge from both the Bay Park plant and the wastewater plant in Long Beach, to remove their discharges permanently from Reynolds Channel, go through Bay Park plant, and then to pump the treated water from the plant up to Cedar Creek, to the Cedar Creek plant in Wanto, which already has a 3-mile outfall pipe out to the ocean. So this would really improve the back bays. It would improve the ability of the back bays to handle storm surge. This is really a very, very positive project from an environmental standpoint of view.
I truly understand that, but you know what? They got to meet the higher quality of the EPA, okay, of the Water Safety Act, American Water. They handle Lido and Atlantic Beach. My time's up, I know.
Thank you, Mr. Assis. Oh, yeah, that's it. Name
Good
and address.
evening. Ray Elmer, 560 West Broadway. I just heard that this is going to be very beneficial from an environmental point of view of discharging the treated sewage, taking it out of Reynolds Channel, but pumping it out into the ocean. This is millions of gallons per day that will be discharged through the ocean outfall pipe. We saw exactly what happened with Bay Park here, where the machinery broke down and we slowly poisoned Reynolds Channel. And not once did any government official, Town of Hempstead, Nassau County, Long Beach say that we were poisoning Reynolds Channel. There was never a notice, maybe we shouldn't be fishing off of the Magnolia Pier. But now we're going to pump it out into the ocean. Millions of gallons per day. When there is the technology to turn the sewage treatment into water for irrigation and water for drinking water. The technology has been there for 50 years. New York City uses it. Israel uses it. New Jersey uses it. Las Vegas uses it. Southern California uses it. But yet, Long Beach is going to be a flusher on a toilet bowl out into the Atlantic Ocean. I'm sorry, but I know it's not really part of this issue.
It's not.
But
not,
but it was
and I-
brought
and I
up that
think-
this is such a great environmental plan. I tell you, you're solving one problem, but you're creating another. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this particular item? Seeing no hands, I close the hearing.
On to the regular calendar. Item 1 is a local law amending the Charter of City of Long Beach regarding sewer rents. A hearing has been held on this item already. Item 2 is a resolution fixing and providing for the 2018 season of the Ocean Beach Park.
Okay, every year we open our beach park Memorial Day weekend, weekends only, until school the primary school lets out. So this is the posting of the beach park schedule, and when we go part-time and then when we go full-time.
Any questions from the council?
No.
Opening the beach. Any questions from the public? Opening the beach. Thank you, Mr. Cease. Next item.
Item 3 is a resolution delegating to the city controller of the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, the powers to authorize the issuance of $4 million tax anticipation notes of said city, or so much thereof as may be necessary, in anticipation of the collection of taxes levied for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2018, and to prescribe the terms, forms, and contents, and provide for the sale and credit enhancement of such notes.
Okay, so right now we have $4 million owed to us by the state. If that money comes in between now and the end of this fiscal year, there will be no borrowing. If it doesn't, we need to authorize the borrowing because there are certain time frames that come in. There's an estoppel period and such, so that we need the authority, or actually the permission, to borrow the money if necessary. We do anticipate getting the money before the end of the fiscal year, but we can't take a chance. As I said, if we do get it, there will be no borrowing. And then if we don't get it, if we don't get the money, once we get the money in, there's also wording in here to make sure that the bond is paid off, with that, or else it has to go back to council approval for any amendment. The note.
Right, and there was a specific compromise that was arrived at before this, whereby if the proceeds from New York State and FEMA for this $4.1 million come in during the life of this TAN, the city will be in a position to evaluate its cash position at that time, and if it decides it needs to spend that money for any other purpose before the TAN is due in June 2019, that allocation must be explicitly approved by a council resolution within 2 council meetings of receipt of the FEMA and New York State funds.
Any questions from the council? No. Ms. McGinnis?
Karen McGinnis, 102 Pennsylvania Avenue. My questions are in line with Mr. McNally's regarding process. I've been looking over the local finance laws when a government is within fiscal distress. So I would like assurances that certain processes are happening. When I look at the law, it says that the chief financial officer of the municipality is supposed to prepare a quarterly report of summarized budget data depicting the overall trends of actual revenues and budget expenditures for the entire budget rather than individual line items. The chief fiscal officer is also to prepare a report of a quarterly trial balance of general ledger accounts. These reports are supposed to be submitted to the governing board, which in this case is the city council, and the chief executive officer of such municipality, the state director of the budget, the state controller, the chair of the Assembly Ways Commission, and on and on. Is that happening?
Is this related to this $4.1 million?
Yeah, it's okay. I'll go over the section from it. It's New York Consolidated Laws, Local Finance Law, LFN, and then 10.10, and it's section C. For each fiscal year occurring during the time deficit bonds or bond anticipation notes issued in anticipation of the sale of such bonds are outstanding, up to and including the last fiscal year during which such debt or debt issued to refund debt such debt is outstanding, the chief financial officer is responsible to produce quarterly reports and so on and so forth. And that is supposed to be given to the city council, each city council member, and all the way up to the state controller. Is that happening?
Is that solely for a bond or for
Well,
a
to answer
TAN?
your first question,
It
Ramo,
says
no, it has no
deficit bonds
bearing on
or
this.
bond anticipation notes.
She's asking about deficit financing. So your question, it does not have, it's not involved with this authorization.
Right.
That's the answer to the first question. The second answer is yes, those quarterly reports are sent annually, quarterly to New York State, and they're made available to the city as needed.
So this,
It's a requirement of being under deficit financing. So for the 10 years that the bonds are paid back, you're required to do quarterly reporting to New York State and other entities.
And that includes them being in the city every year.
That's also part of legislation, yes.
But it has nothing to do with this item.
But it's not right, the TAN is not affected by that type of legislation.
and that's submitted to the city council members?
It's made available to them, yes.
Great. My next question, it talks about the fiscal year and the budget. It says within 30 days after the adoption of the budget for the next succeeding fiscal year, the city is to prepare a 3-year financial plan covering the next succeeding fiscal year and the 2 fiscal years thereafter. And this is also from a recent audit report from the State Office of the State of Controller for the city of Olean, where it highly recommends that municipal financial plans for multi-year purposes are given to the city council members and the state so that you have an idea to project future shortfalls of revenue. So I would hope that is happening as well.
You met with the financial planners, right?
Yep, absolutely. We did meet with the financial planners multiple times with respect to this item in particular.
So that's submitted, that information is submitted to the city council members?
I'm not sure what you're, this is a verbal conversation we've had with the financial planners over the last several weeks.
It says
Multiple verbal
the
conversations.
financial plan is to contain projected employment levels, projected annual expenditures, fringe benefits, debt service, appropriate reserve amounts. Copies of the plan shall be provided to the chief executive, the state director of the budget, the state controller, the chair of the assembly, and all governing bodies.
I mean, admittedly, this is not my bailiwick, to be honest with you, but my understanding, especially from having heard the response of Ms. Hightower, is that the information is made available to the council.
I'm sorry, the report you're reading from is not a Long Beach report. You just said it was City of Olean?
No, that was a
Olean.
separate, basically, this information mentioned in the recent audit. I went to the law that they referred to, which is Law 10.10, that the information is to be made available.
Okay, but the ones you were just talking about wasn't related to that law. It was related to a City of Olean report.
Incorrect.
I believe we already answered that. The information is sent quarterly to New York State. It's requested to be given to the regional office, which they then disseminate it as needed. It's not requested to be given directly to the comptroller's office.
It's not?
No, the regional office requests that we send it to them, and then they disseminate it.
And all that information is available to the city council members for the past several years.
It is available, yes.
So they can look 2 years ago and see the 3-year financial plan.
As far as a 3-year financial plan, I don't know that that was required of us from New York State.
Per local law 10.10, it's required that you're supposed to have a financial plan and it's supposed to be submitted to the city council members.
I believe the official statements of the year of the city, at least once or twice a year, include a 3-year cash flow. So that would satisfy that requirement.
Okay, so that's made available to the city council members. And then my final question is, do we have a fund policy?
A fund balance policy? Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. It's set at 5%, which is actually the minimum for a general fund. It's recommended to be 10%. Right now, the city has theirs set at 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak on the TAN? He spoke already, right?
Hello, good evening. I think most of you know me, and I know all of you except you, John. We haven't met yet. My name's Greg Van Delkenberg.
Thank you.
I've been a resident of Long Beach since 1949, so when somebody says I've been living here for 30 years, I look them in the face and say, tourist. A couple of things I want to bring to your attention. I'm not going to be vituperous or anything else like that, but we have a problem, okay? You
Speak
have
in the
to
mic.
either reduce You either have to reduce expenses or increase revenue. How do you reduce expenses? I know we as a union member, or I as a union member, are going to be taking a hit. Last year there was no raise. This year I'm going to be giving back a couple of days or whatever. Listen, guys, we don't make $100,000 a year. Okay, we're in the $20 an hour range. That's tough. Okay, and nobody wants to be in that position because somebody didn't budget something a year ago. All right, just having said that, if you keep asking the union for more givebacks and more givebacks, eventually you're going to have a small revolution on your hands. Just giving you a heads up on that. Okay, now in terms of revenue, the council needs to think out of the box. Personally, I can't come up with a concept where, hey, I'm going to generate an extra $1 million tomorrow. But one person said, do we really need to spend $40,000, $50,000 on flowers? No. This isn't Santa Monica or Venice, California. We don't need to be a little glitzy. We don't need it. Company cars. How many black SUVs are parked outside? 4 or 5. Do we really need them? Can people just use their own personal cars? Don't need to pay lease, insurance, gas, so forth. I don't know if this is possible, but you've got this big block between Edwards and Riverside Boulevard. Can we use that for parking? $10 a day per car, Saturday and Sunday, over the summer, that's $100,000. Just a concept, just trying to think of, you know, it's kind of nitty-gritty nickel dime type of thing, but after a while they turn into quarters and dollars. One of the things that this gentleman is bringing up in wastewater, which is where I work, I'm a plant operator over there. One of the things that every wastewater plant across the entire United States complains about is grease, okay? It costs you guys money. It costs money to clean it up. It costs money when it breaks stuff down. You really want to eliminate it. It's also a revenue stream for you if you think about it. I was mentioning to my commissioner, there's a place up in New York, same problem. What they did was they came up with a form that they went to every business in town that had a kitchen, and they took note of the type of fryers or whatever grease pits that they have and so forth, and they made a list, okay? And then every 6 months or so, they would go by and make sure these businesses were using what is available to them to prevent grease from going into the system. You didn't do it, it's a fine. Oh, it did? That fast? Wow, I'm a good talker then, aren't I?
I
All
heard
right,
you, though,
well
about the
then-
grease. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I just want to say it's a little revenue stream that you might want to think of as well. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Mr. Lester?
Roy Lester, 72 Boyd. I'm trying to figure out this bond and why we need to do it. We don't know that we're going to even need the money.
Correct.
You expect the money to be coming in.
Correct.
It's not part of the budget because it's just borrowing. Does it have to be done now?
Yes.
It does have to be done
There's a
now.
revenue anticipation note that matures at the end of June. It's due, and we can't renew that. That's why it has to be done now.
But why can't we take it out of our reserves?
We
Instead of borrowing money again?
Well, right now, by my calculations, we've taken about $8 million out of the reserves on suggestions, and we only have 4, so.
Well, how did you take $8 million out? That's not what
Because
the
there was
budget says.
1.6 that someone suggested we take out of the reserves. You're suggesting 4 million out of the reserves, and there was another, I think,
No,
2 million.
How much did you
Well, we
take?
can't go less than
Right
five-
now, you
5%,
have
right?
8 million in reserves, right? 779,000?
I also want to point out that reserves does not necessarily mean cash. So some of the reserves are tied up in receivables from FEMA
No, the
and
fund
other entities.
balance.
The fund balance does not necessarily equal cash. It's a reserve of unused revenues in a prior year, but you're still waiting on some of that money to come in. So
So
some of
it's
that
not-
reserve is tied up in.
Whoa, whoa. You're
It doesn't
telling me
represent
that
cash.
The fund balance is not a real fund balance? You really don't
It
have
is fund balance, it's not cash.
Well, nothing's cash. I don't expect you guys to be walking around with $100 bills. I don't think that's happening, okay? Is it a fund balance? Do you have that money?
We have fund balance.
Thanks.
Again, you're
Thank
saying
you.
money.
So you have almost $8 million in the fund balance.
No, we have about 4.
Well, you said you were, in the budget, you have 8. So what's the truth now. Because in your proposed budget, you were going to take $7,799,000 to make that $89 million budget. And you guys nicely looked through the budget, through the original budget, the requested amount, and you saw that you could make $7 million worth of cuts, which you did make, which was great. Okay? So you didn't have to take that money. But if you didn't take that money, now we're finding out it's not here after you put it in the budget that it was here? Read, it's right here in your budget.
Yes, he's talking about, so in the proposed budget, the last two columns is going to be the department requests. So it's basically every dollar that the department requested.
Yes.
And then we also have the proposed, which is what we're actually putting forth.
Right.
So that $7.8 million that you're talking about is the amount of gap that between of the requested amounts, the revenue we had versus what was requested to be spent next year.
And
It's-
the
it
way
was just
you
a
were doing
requested
it
amount.
was from the fund balance. Look at the budget. How you were going to make that up was from the fund balance. Now, how could you have proposed that in the fund balance if you didn't have it?
We didn't propose it. It's just it's just a factor of what the department's requested. We are not proposing that. We can't propose that.
Who was requesting the fund balance to be moved over?
All of the department requests exceeded what revenue was available to us
So
by
who
7.8
put that
million.
number there? The departments didn't.
It's a function of all their requests, yes.
Right, the department didn't put the number there, so somebody put the number there. Now, last year's budget, you said you had $9 million. I have last year's budget if you want to look at it. You said you have $9 million.
Last year's budget between the three funds, yes.
And you said you were spending 800,000 plus, I think, 159,000, something like that. 1 million from 9 million equals 8 million. What happened to the money?
Well, you're talking about the 9.4 million that was talked about in the last budget. Of that, 7 million
Not
of,
talked about, that you said in the last budget you had.
talked about said, they mean the same thing. So that 9.4 million was all three funds. 7 million of it was general fund. Between the deficit that is happening between the bond not being authorized and the appropriation of fund balance, we expect general fund balance to be about $4 million next year.
So, in other words, you've already taken into account the $2.1 million bond. That's what you're saying. The bond that wasn't authorized, you've already taken that out of the fund. So
Yes.
why is the CSEA here complaining that they're not getting paid if you've taken the money out already? What am I missing?
You're missing the fact that fund balance doesn't always equal cash. You need cash to pay people. Fund balance doesn't pay people.
Fund balance is supposed to be real money. It's
Some of it is
supposed to
tied
be
up in
real money.
receivables. It's just like any other balance sheet. Some of it's tied up in
Listen,
receivables, assets.
I did budgets for years, much bigger than this, with the school board, okay? We never had fund balances that wasn't fund balance. Now, you also have a risk retention fund, and you also have a contingency fund. Now, you're telling me today that the contingency fund that you're funding here of 1.7 million isn't really 1.7 million. The risk retention fund, you're asking for 3 million this year? What's in the risk retention fund? If you're asking for 3 million this year, what's in it already that you're adding 3 million more?
We're not adding. That is an ongoing expense. The risk retention fund bears the expense of workers' compensation, of 207A payments to our retired firefighters that are on disability, and other small judgments and claims that are paid for by the city by cash instead of bonding.
So we spent all the risk retention fund from last year? Well, I'd love to get answers.
Anybody else wish to speak on the TAN authorization? Oh, we got one more.
Yeah, hi, good evening again, Jay Gustler, Long Beach. Just a couple of clarifications on this. I believe it was 2 meetings ago, you guys floated another bond resolution, and it was tabled. Am I correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That was this one.
Okay, and in the interim, you floated a $2.1 million bond resolution. It was voted down by well, it didn't go on to the 4 votes needed to pass it, correct?
The 2.1, correct.
There we go. Doesn't hurt to answer. So now this particular resolution also requires a 4-vote majority, yes?
No.
This doesn't, a TAN?
Notes are 3, only bonds are 4.
Okay, so this can be done by a simple majority.
Correct.
All right, and there's something in the language of it. I know you said that it has to be done now because it basically has to be done before the end of the fiscal year or something to that effect?
No, that wasn't what I was trying to say.
Okay, but I'm just wondering about, I think you said something about it can't be renewed, but there's language
Oh, the
in here.
RAN. You're talking about the RAN that's actually due at the end of June. That's correct. The RAN, the revenue anticipation note, cannot be renewed again.
Okay, so, but that's not what this is. This is a TAN,
Right.
correct? Okay, and this is basically looking for an advance on money that's coming sometime after July 1st or potentially.
Technically, no. It's an advance on tax revenue.
Okay. So there's also language in here about if we get the money before the end of the fiscal year, that we have to pay it back, or we come back to the council to authorize some other
Right.
idea.
It either gets paid back right away, or if 2 council meetings elapse from the time that New York State and FEMA provide those funds, then it has to come back to the council meeting for any alternate allocation.
Okay, so that further confuses me. I mean, I get that. But how are we talking about a tax anticipation note if we're talking about money, we're talking about plugging a gap between now and the receipt of money from New York State and FEMA. That FEMA New York State money is not tax money, correct? It's reimbursement for expenses?
But it's for purposes like this, for a deficit in operating. I know Christie can speak to this better than I can, but it is being used for its proper purpose, and we've been advised by bond counsel of such as well.
All right, well, I guess you guys.
Jay, the big issue here is that we will not have our taxes come in time to pay for this. The RANs, by law, can only be renewed 3 times. The Sandy recovery, we're in our 7th year.
Okay.
So the RANs can't keep being renewed because there's a 3-year statute. Matter of fact, our controller at the time, Ms. Hightower, had the foresight to suggest that we contact the state to ask them to alter state law to make the RANs 5 years, which is much more realistic when you're talking about recovering money from Sandy. So we don't get that money, but we have to pay it back. The only funds we can guarantee to come in are tax anticipation notes from our July taxes. We are confident that between now and the July taxes, we will get the money in, and then it will replenish the general fund.
Okay, I understand. But can we agree that this type of expenditure would more appropriately be covered by a RAN than a TAN?
Yes, but it's
Okay.
legally prohibited.
But our RAN credit card is maxed out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
thanks.
Anybody else? On the TAN to pay the RAN? Nope. Seeing no hands, next item.
Item 4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the rental of portable restroom trailers for the Ocean Beach Park.
Yes, with the continued restoration after Superstorm Sandy, we have no bathroom facilities on New York or Neptune Boulevard. And where's the third one go, John? Virginia. So this is to meet all of the requirements of having, the Department of Health requirements of having restroom facilities on the beach, meeting all the ADA compliant requirements, and this would be $162,000.
Okay. Any questions from the council?
Just one. It says here that the city hopes to get reimbursement from FEMA. Have we gotten reimbursement in previous years for the trailers?
Yes, to date, we've been reimbursed for every year except for last year. It's a whole process. Once we order the bathrooms, put the bathrooms in, we submit, and this is one of those project worksheets that we do not close. We put in for it. There's a process for approval, but they lag a year behind approving us. So we're owed for last year. We've already submitted for the bathrooms for this year. So we'll probably get last year's payment this year and then next year. And hopefully this will be the last year we have to rent bathrooms, because with the Army Corps sand replenishment and the bathroom in Minnesota, we'll have 3 permanent bathrooms and a permanent lifeguard station, so we will not need to rent these anymore after that. So
Great. So you said last year's were approved, we're just waiting on it?
last year's were approved,
Were
but we had
approved.
not have received the money, and we've applied for this year. And,
Gotcha.
I just can't guarantee we'll receive it, but It's happened every year for the past 4 years, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope, seeing none. Next item.
Item 5 is the resolution authorizing publication for hearing of a local law amending Subpart C of related acts relating to the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding a local law to override the tax levy limit established in General Municipal Law, Section 3C. This item is for publication only. A hearing will be held May 15th at 7 p.m. And we're on to the voting. Item 1 is a local law amending the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding sewer rents. Just move the adoption of this item.
I will.
Second? Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 2 is a resolution fixing and providing for the 2018 season of the Ocean Beach Park. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item? Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 3 is a resolution delegating to the City Controller of the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, the powers to authorize the issuance of $4 million tax anticipation notes of said city or so much thereof as may be necessary in anticipation of the collection of taxes levied for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2018, and to preserve the terms, form, and contents, and provide for the sale and credit enhancement of such notes. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
I would just, before voting, I want to give credit where credit is due and thank my fellow council members. There was language that they agreed to add to the resolution to address some concerns I had about the money when it did come in possibly being used for alternative, and they agreed to put language in here that if that happens, it has to come to the council. So with that, I vote yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Item 4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the rental of portable restroom trailers for the ocean. I'm sorry. Nope, I got the right item. I'm a little tired, I'm sorry. Item 4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the rental of portable restroom trailers for the Ocean Beach Park. Yeah, I had it right the first time. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
If I vote yes, can we get it here now? I've been up here 3.5 hours. Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Before I vote, I just want to say that I'm pleased that we're moving forward, but based on my concerns from last year, I'm still asking that we come together and form a committee so that we can have community input with respect to any ADA situations or anything that really refers to those who are at this point physically challenged or even mentally challenged. With that, I vote yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
Finally, item 5 is a resolution authorizing publication for hearing of a local law amending Subpart C of related acts relating to the charter of the City of Long Beach regarding a local law to override the tax levy limit established in General Municipal Law, Section 3C. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes.
City Manager's monthly personnel report has been filed by the City Clerk, who will make a motion to close the meeting.
I will.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilmember Bendo.
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
President Aramo.
Yes. All right, we're going to start our good and welfare section in 5 minutes.
You going home? I'm going home. Good for you.
Okay, as we know, good and welfare consists of 3 minutes of uninterrupted time. A lot of folks filled out cards tonight, and a lot of people used the topic line, which is very helpful to keep our good and welfare section coherent, so I thank you for that. Please be respectful of other speakers. And with that, first we have Kathleen O'Leary. Good evening. Just state your name again for the record.
Kathleen O'Leary, 350 Market Street. I wanted to comment on the federal money that we got for the OEM manager's position. I know that we were offered or given $300,000 for that position, and I feel that by making it a part-time position, you really put us at risk. You know, just myself, using my imagination, we have an island, okay, with exposure from land, only accessible by 3 bridges, and open access to the water. Now, if someone can plan 9/11, anyone could plan a terrorist attack on this city with very little effort, if I can think of it.
Right.
So I guess I have 2 questions. First of all, I want to say I have complete confidence in Scott Kemmons and Mr. Corbett. This has nothing to do with them. But I do feel that it should be a full-time position. And I wanted to know, let me see what my question is. Was that $300,000 added into the budget? And will we be able to get transparency on how much of the $300,000 was spent building the physical office in this building, and how much is going for salaries? Because I also see the increase in the building department's
Right.
budget. It
So-
seems like money's going two ways.
So my understanding, and I don't know if council remembers, but when we had the OEM hearing, we were offered $300,000 grant money to pay for an OEM, to run the OEM for 2 years. And then after that, we would have to, hire an OEM, someone to manage it at that same rate. I assume it would be higher at that point. So there was a decision made to try and save some money and use the funds to build the center, because we needed more money. And someone can correct me if they remember differently. So we used like $17,000, I think, for each of the 2 co-leaders of the OEM. The hope with an OEM is that you really never use it, right? So I think we anticipate future storms and needing it and using it. But I think on a full-time basis, we don't necessarily need to pay a salary of that caliber, especially with the budget crisis we're kind of facing.
Yeah, I understand the timing is bad, but I don't think, I think we've grown complacent in that we survived Sandy and we're getting over it. But OEM doesn't just handle hurricanes, the 100-year storm. It handles terrorism.
Anything.
And just by Toomey Diamond's lateness today, we can see what one bridge going out does.
Right.
You have an island, you have 3 bridges, you have no hospital, and you have 2 points of entry for a terrorist. So you're saying they're going to take a salary of $17,000 each?
I think it was about 17, if that's right. Like it's a little stipend to do that extra work.
So where does
and
the
then
rest of the $300,000
into the
go?
building the facility, which is going to be on this floor.
But see, I picture something like the control panel of the Starship Enterprise with
That's-
nobody there.
Oh,
I would rather see a full-time manager than the
I don't think it's in
total
use
type-tech.
if there's no emergency. My understanding of it, I'm not an expert in this field, but my understanding is that if there's no emergency happening, it's not in use.
But you're spending, how much are you spending on the office?
It's all grant money. It's $1 million and change or something. What is it?
No, I'm asking for
Yeah, I'm not
transparency
100%
on
sure.
the
Oh, maybe the co-
300,000.
It's not his wheelhouse, but I think he's well versed on it. Commissioner.
Yeah, the cost of the OEM will be about $1.6 million. And just a little comment on the reimbursement. Out of the $300,000, $150,000 has gone towards the construction of the OEM, and we'll recoup more this year than the $17,000 and the $20,000 additional pay. We will recoup almost $150,000 of their pay, so it'll cover more than the increased pay that we gave them this year.
Okay. 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 I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Michael Delory?
Michael Delory, Long Beach. My only comment or concern is that between the civil service employees earlier today that voiced their concern, I know Councilwoman Moore, and they were led to, I believe they were misunderstood as far as the 2,100,000, and I hope that somewhere along the line between now and the budget adoption that some of the air could be cleared out. And I don't know how you're going to do that, but mending fences or just building bridges, we're all in this together, and that's all I would like to see. And thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Lester. Ms. McGinnis. Sorry.
Karen
Name and
McGinnis,
address.
102 Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
I think the discussions today bring into question the soundness of the entire 2019 budget. I implore you to closely review the revenue assumptions as they are masking what should really be an even higher tax increase. The areas that I suggest you look at are departmental income, licenses and permits, and fines and sales of property. You guys really have to make the tough choices. There's no easy answers. I said it 2 weeks ago. It's whether or not you're really going to do it. And you owe it to yourselves and your future careers to do it. I also want to suggest that with the 12.3 tax increase, you mentioned that how much dollars that is, but also mention how much you've saved in this budget versus last year's budget. Like, how much have you saved from each union? How much have you saved in overtime? How much have you saved in supplies? And maybe that would help the crowd be less, irate about this budget process. And I think this really reflects an educational process that we've all been going through the past few years, and that each one of us is responsible to work together whether we like each other or not, and to be objective and to really fix the city. So I really hope that you guys do it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you had three: departmental income, license and permits. I missed the third one.
Fines and sales of property.
Fines and sales and property. When I compare them to 2017, they just don't look right for the 2019 budget. They're too high. So I really think you need a higher tax increase.
Thank you. Mr. Ashmead.
Thank you, John Ashmead, 38 East Beach, Long Beach. Just a couple of questions. One, I want to circle back to what I started on before but hadn't intended to, and that was the city manager payments. And this is really just a process question. The only superior to the city manager is the city council, right? There's no other superior within the city governance structure. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I assume that the city manager didn't sign his own timesheet because he recognized he had a conflict and he had someone else have to do it.
It appears that way, yeah.
And the city council, am I to understand, had no idea that that payment was being made?
That is correct.
That is correct, yeah. I mean, I know in general, when people leave the payroll, they do get separation pay, right? Like just in a general way.
But you're talking about the city manager, who you are the only superior of. Everyone else that works for the city is a subordinate of the city manager.
Right.
And you're telling me that you were not aware that the payment was being made. Was anyone on the dais aware at the time that it was paid, whether or not it was being paid, and the amounts? And did the council appoint someone else to act as city manager for the purpose of signing off on that?
No.
The city charter does have provisions regarding when someone else is either appointed by the existing city manager or the council, and that was not done for this purpose specifically?
There was,
The city council, no.
there was an acting city manager designated at the time, which is effectuated by service of a letter on the clerk of the existing city manager. So the city manager files a letter with the clerk designating an acting city manager. At the time, the acting city manager was Commissioner Tagny.
But Commissioner Tagny said he was not the one who signed that.
That's correct.
Okay. And you've seen no other letter designating anyone else to act as city manager
At that time, no. That he was the designated acting city manager at that
And
time.
he did not sign it. Okay, thank you. Next question is, that was 2.1 million of separation payments that were made. Were there other separation payments made during the 17-18 fiscal year?
I think that's all of them, right?
As far as we know.
I think that's my understanding is that's all of them, but
President
Usually, but-
Aramo, and I may have misunderstood you, but I think when Ms. Egan was up here, in response to a number of, had a number of questions, I think you said that the $2.1 million bond will be put back before the council again?
no,
Did I misunderstand that?
yes.
All right, so
I said we're still borrowing for it.
you're borrowing money, but you're not borrowing for those payments because those payments are already made. You'd be borrowing to fill a hole
Fill
in the
that
budget.
hole, yes.
So that $2.1 million budget, which said it was to pay fund separation payments, will never be brought back, that specific bond, for that purpose?
Correct.
Could it be brought back today?
I think it's too late.
And why is it too late?
My understanding is it's too late for the way the bond, because we needed it for the last month of the fiscal year, is my understanding.
So it can't be
So-
brought back
so they-
as a matter of timing to get the money before the end of the year? Or it can't
Yes.
be brought back because it was seeking to basically pay for separation payments that were already paid?
I think partially both, I think. If I understood our bond counsel.
There's not enough time for the notice period required
Right.
for the bond.
Is that the reason it's not being brought back?
Might be one of the reasons, but
Among the reasons.
Could it not be brought back because the separation payments had already been made?
This is between bond counsel and the city council. I can't answer that question.
So bond counsel is, the attorneys that
That's-
wrote, they even write the resolutions when we do bonds. We have an outside law firm that we hire for various different things. So this one is our bond counsel. So
And
it's
they
not
wrote
counsel
the
like me,
resolution.
it's
they wrote-
counsel by him.
They
You know what I
wrote the
mean?
resolution that was presented to the city council?
100%.
And they wrote the agenda item, which said it was for separation payments?
When you say the agenda item, you
It's
talking about
the agenda, the city council agenda item. There's a description
The legislative
of the
memo?
bond and a legislative memo.
No, that was probably written by my assistant. The legislative memo, which is not actual legislation, it's just a description.
So the legislative memo said it was to fund separation payments.
That's what it's typically called, although it often, almost every year, certainly every year I've been here, it's been also used to fund drawdowns on accrued banks of time.
Is it proper, if that bond had not been voted down that night or not passed, would it have been legally proper, the way it was presented, to borrow that money?
That's the question I can't answer. We have
All right.
bond counsel. I'm not, it's, from my standpoint, it's privileged. I can't discuss it, but it sounds like the privilege has been waived by the council tonight, so they can.
All right. Can counsel answer that?
I'm not an attorney.
Well, he said privilege was waived and that you were the client.
But I'm not in the position to answer that, though. I'm not bond counsel, and I can't speak for
All right, the Corporation Counsel has basically just said that the client has waived the privilege. Does anyone on the dais understand whether or not their understanding, on the advice of counsel, this bond could have been drawn down based on the way it was presented to the council?
I need to ask a question in terms of our current counsel. Bond counsel instructed us and specifically said that this was confidential information. So are you now saying that we're free to share information here on the dais?
What I'm saying is that information has been shared already.
I'm confused.
I've heard.
Can you give?
We each have our own privilege, don't we?
Well, that's a complex question about whether each of you have your own privilege. I believe there's a chance it may have been waived, first with Councilman Bendo's remarks about bond counsel. But I'm not in a position to answer that question.
But your office prepared the legislative memo which said it was to fund separation payments, which was not in fact the case. Is that correct?
A legislative memo, Mr. Ashmead, is not legislation.
I'm asking you whether you said, clarifying that your office prepared the legislative memo to the city and to the council which said it was to fund separation payments.
That's right, as it's been done every year.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Phil Schlitz, I don't see him. Looks like he's gone. Neil and Nora, it says. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, Nora Egan. My husband filled that in. He's left. So my question is, again, about the city manager's position. Where are we on the interviews? And when will we know? Because we need to know sooner rather than later. And Mr. Agostisi, have you applied for the position? And if so, will you retract your application?
If I did, as the city attorney, I wouldn't be in a position to discuss it. That's
Okay.
for the council. And so is B.
I'm sorry?
Question B is for the council as well.
Question B is for the Okay, well, I would suggest that if Mr. Agostisi did apply for the position of city manager, that the city council members, all 5 of you, would reject his application. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Treston? I don't see. Oh. I didn't see her back there. I was looking for her over here. You have a mic? Good evening. Just state your name and address for the record.
Liz Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Liz Treston, Long Beach. I'd like to take this moment to thank the social media platforms and the Long Beach Herald that engage residents in providing real information and sources. Hello. French toast, there we go. Sources to really, we can actually put this in the budget, no? Okay. Oh, battery change. Hang on. Stand by. Thank you. Okay, don't start talking. Okay, second time. Good evening. I'd like to take this moment to thank the social media platforms and the Long Beach Herald that engaged residents in providing real information and sources to read of the service cuts that affected the most vulnerable of our city. Once again, the city's ability to provide correct and timely information to its residents remains murky. So thanks, Project 11561, Citizens to Save Long Beach, Long Beach Matters, and Long Island Streets among the few. Thank you, Honorable Ms. Moore and Honorable Bendo, for standing up and actually reading the proposed budgets and our city charter, and perhaps saving us from yet another potential proceeding that could cost us more money we obviously do not have and never had to begin with. As residents, only few questioned the past budgets presented in fancy PowerPoint slides in years past. We were fooled. If some of the reports were made public and easy to find, we may have noticed we have not had money for years, yet raises and new positions were and may be still being given to the select. Any management position does not get a raise in fiscal crisis. That you continue to vote to give these jumps in salaried exempt positions is mind-boggling to the residents and leaves us once again dealing with infantile behaviors that only disservice the city, its workforce, and its taxpayers. Speaking of which, why, Mr. Aramo, have you blocked community members from your Facebook page? You are using it in your city council position, thus engaging in viewpoint discrimination, which violates the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. After last week's bashing of two of our council leaders, I respectfully request that you step down as City Council President, as your behaviors do not reflect those of a leader, a problem solver, or a team player. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheston. Allison Blanchette.
Allison Blanchette. Just want to backtrack to the budget stuff, and you were asking for suggestions, so I jotted down a few. Work with smart residents. You've heard some really great suggestions here. I hope you take the time to reach out to some of those residents. And working with smart residents, I'd like to think I'm smart, and I've told you on multiple occasions about grants. The state just went through and there was another $15 million given in a series of grants that I was working on, and I told you to reach out to me and you didn't, but the other municipalities I worked with were actually able to receive some of that money, so yay for them, boo for us. Right-size the price of parking. The guy with the meters, that's part of it. Let's look at our municipal lots that we're paying for. Let's look at all this free storage space for private vehicles that we're just giving away. Speed cameras. Putting speed cameras in a manner where we can get some of the revenue. I know that there is a difference between Nassau County and like where our tickets and ticket revenue goes to between Nassau and here. I'd really love to see speed cameras. I'd really like to see school cameras come back. But anyways, remove all city vehicles. There are a lot of city-issued vehicles. We're what, like 3 square miles? Like, why are we giving vehicle? Really? It's so pointless. Give a bike. And then like it sounds funny, but why are we giving city vehicles to any employee? Like, it's insane and like escalates. And then another suggestion is send in the paperwork to get reimbursements for that Nassau County bus, for the municipal bus from Nassau County. That money's been sitting there for years. And you know who hasn't been doing the paperwork? Do I need to say who it is again? So those are my suggestions. Yuki had to leave, so you can cross his name off when you get to it. Yuki,
he's next because he put buses also. So.
Yeah. So you can cross that off.
Okay.
Those are statements for everyone from Yuki.
Perfect. Thank you.
And he's from the Long Island Bus Riders Union. And he came here with that is what he was going to read. And one of the suggestions on there about working with the N33 for service in the West End. I've talked to Denise Ford about that, and she's actually going to be reaching out to NICE. So that's a really great suggestion. You might want to circle back to Denise on that. And now I'm going to put my Long Island Streets hat on. It takes an exceptionally cruel person to cut public transportation for our most vulnerable road users, vulnerable population. Sorry, I'm extremely tired. The bus cuts, 3 days notice, and no public meeting. Why didn't we have a public meeting? I do not want to hear one person blame Tagney. It is your job to make sure there's a public meeting on that. And thank you, Scott Mandel. I do need to recognize you were able to get the signs in Spanish. You spent several phone calls with me on that, and thank you so much. And
That was a council, everybody pulled together for that.
you were the person who we were talking to on the phone, so I have to say thank you, and thank you everyone on that. And thank you for finally emailing me, Aramo. It shows that your email account works. But we need those buses back.
I agree. Thank you, Ms. Blanchett. Ms. Eileen Hessian?
I was going to pass, but a few people mentioned this, and I just want to get an answer. As I looked around the room tonight, there were a lot of people on the separation list who never separated. I know Mr. Agostisi said he was going to separate, and that's why he got it. But somebody had mentioned earlier tonight that it would bring a lot more trust into you if you told us immediately how these numbers were figured out. Somebody here must have these numbers, and I just think we need to see them now, not through the state auditor, but now. The other thing is that somebody just came up and said, is there anybody above the city council? And I'm confused because I think the city charter was never changed and that the city manager is above the city council, that you answer to him rather than him answering to you. Is that correct? Is the answer, if the answer is no, you don't have to explain.
They're actually co-equal branches of government. That's the answer.
Co-equal.
Yes. The city manager
So he was able to make the bus
city manager is
decision.
appointed by the city
Right.
council, but
Right.
it is a co-equal branch of this government.
Okay, so Commissioner Tagney was able to make the decision on the buses by himself
Yes.
without going to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
He has a lot of latitude. I see, I don't see Ms. Adelson's not here. Ms. Volasevich, you still here?
No.
Nope. Mr. Sampinto, you still here? Pass. Jim Kirkland? Ashmead's telling him what to say. State your name and address for the record.
Jim Kirkland, Long Beach, New York. I happened to be looking through something and saw that Jack's last year here, his contract, he was paid $178,000 for the year. And I know in the current budget, I think I saw an amount of over $300,000 being budgeted for the city manager in a time when we're kind of scraping for cash. That seems a bit excessive. I don't know, it just said city manager.
It's probably
That's
his
all I know.
secretary, too.
Okay, I would hope so, because that means he's making about $100,000 more than de Blasio, who I think has a bigger job, bigger city maybe. No, okay. That was basically all I had noticed that I wanted to talk about. So I thank you for answering
I
that.
think
And the same thing with the police commissioner also. Is that going to be his office too? Bragan makes about 200 and a quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. I know he's not collecting two salaries now.
No.
All right.
Thank you.
There's something else that I've heard, and I keep saying that this is really what it is, but just to be sure. When Edwards was fired, he was mayor. And they decided having a mayor wasn't such a good thing. You know, they don't last very long. And so they created the position of city manager. And I believe that in the charter, all they did was cross out mayor and write in city manager and didn't do anything else.
And he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't fired.
He was fired.
He was fired. He was literally fired.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. He was
Yeah.
pulled in office
By the police commissioner, right?
by a police officer. Yeah.
Oh.
Right, yeah. So in actuality, he has more power over you than you have over him.
Certainly over me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he had all the power over the city council that existed back then, so it would stand the reason that he would still have that kind of power now.
They're set up, they're established to be co-equal branches of government.
Okay.
Even though the city manager is appointed.
But everybody's under the assumption that the city council hires the city manager, but
They do. That's the only difference. It's not an independently elected position. It's an appointed position. However, the way the charter is set up, it's designed so that there are checks and balances between the city manager and the city council.
okay. So even though he's appointed, it's like having two heads of government in a way.
That's the way most governments are established in this country.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's three.
Right.
So, all right.
We have a city court dance for this too. Yeah, we have a court too.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Miss Sarah, what is it, Modesi? Is that right? Sarah? Is there a Sarah here? No? Did I say her name right?
Yeah,
I did?
Modenesi. She left.
Modenesi. Brittany Littlejohn? Mr. Jay Gusler?
Good evening again. Jay Gus of Long Beach.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to piece together some bits of information that I heard over the course of the evening. I heard Mr. Bendo say, and you can correct me if I'm not correctly paraphrasing him, that our bond council basically said we couldn't have done that bond even if you guys had passed the resolution. Is that my understanding of what Mr. Bendo said? And I believe Mr. Agostisi confirmed that?
No, I'm not confirming any characterizations. I'm just saying I'm not at liberty to discuss it.
Okay, so could we have bonded, if you guys had passed that resolution, could we have in fact bonded it?
I mean, I believe so.
Anybody? Nobody? Well, it just seems to me like if we couldn't have bonded it, then Mr. Mooney's attack on Mr. Bendo and Ms. Moore about them blocking this expenditure, which we could not have legally incurred anyway, was kind of pointless. Now, I know you guys have been meeting about the budget for the last couple of weeks with all your union leaders. Did it occur to anybody to inform the leader of the city's biggest union that you couldn't have borrowed the money anyway, and there was no need for him to flame these two city council members over something you guys couldn't have done anyway? And that didn't occur to anybody to?
Without going into details, because my recollection might be different than what Mr. Bendo's was, I don't know if that is an accurate recitation of what we were advised by bond counsel. We were
Okay.
also advised by bond counsel that it's privileged and we were not to discuss. So I listened to the council, so I can't characterize it any other way than it's been put forward, but that's not my recollection of what was put forward.
All right, well, we could debate why
No, we
it
can't.
would,
That's
we could debate why it would be privileged. You're the client. To me, you should
Only I can
you should be
waive
free to
my own
disclose.
privilege.
I'm sorry?
Only I can waive my own privilege. Each person has their own individual privilege.
Okay, that-
They choose on their own. I was advised by counsel not to.
Okay.
I adhere to what counsel tells me.
Advised by counsel, but not told if you do this, there would be some kind of consequences, correct?
Is there a difference?
No difference? Okay. All right, well, I'm going to screw up my order a little bit too, just because of what I just heard. Mr. Agostisi, who I believe is on the precipice of becoming our next city manager, saying something that the city manager is co-equal with the council. I look at the organizational chart in this very budget proposal, and clearly it puts the city council above the city manager, not side by side. In addition, city manager serves at the pleasure of the council. So that's hardly an equal relationship. If they don't like the job you're doing, they should be able to fire you.
That's what's called a check and balance, Mr. Gusso.
Yeah, right. So that's not co-equal. Co-equal, there are no checks and balances. All right. Well, I'd also remind you guys that the city manager has to live in town, not merely rent an apartment to create the illusion of residency. The city manager has to live in town, and I don't think Mr. Agostisi has any intentions of uprooting his family and moving him into town, because number one is he probably can't afford the taxes here. The other thing is, Ms. McGinnis mentioned something about the audited results. You guys said they're not in yet. The current budget shows actuals for the last budget year. So if we don't have the audited budgets, where do we get actuals from? We also have year-to-dates as of, I don't know, the 31st of last month. Where'd we get those from? I mean, surely you guys are keeping tabs on expenses and revenue contemporaneously as they occur. So without the audit, how do we arrive at these projections? I mean, how do we go forward and make a new budget if we still don't know where we stand with the old budget? And if you don't have the audited results, you're guessing.
Mr. Gusso, that was my whole point when I made the statements on April 17th, that everything is in question now. That's why I started asking questions. Everything is in question. Last year's budget, the budget before that, in terms of my experience, everything is in question now and continues to be in question. With respect to the other piece that you raised about the co-equal existence of the city manager and the city council, it has been my experience in the past 2 years that this is the culture. The culture allows for a co-equal system. However, that's not my interpretation of the city charter.
Nor is it mine. I've been in this town a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gusso. Chris Jones? Mr. Arcese is gone. Lucy Centeno?
She's gone.
David Garfamelli? Is that right? No? David?
No.
Barbara Horn? Right. That's right. And Mr. Greg Kalnitsky.
Thank you for hearing us out earlier. Pass.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you for coming. We'll be back here in 2 weeks.